Welcome to everyone in the room. I think what we'll go ahead and do is, I think it would be nice for us to do introductions. So maybe we'll just go around and introduce yourself. Yes.
Very sorry to interrupt you, but we did say start was at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we just wanted Clay an opportunity if there are maybe some, we anticipated some new here. So we were just gonna go around the room and have folks introduce themselves. It's all good.
Okay, so, Todd, how about we start with, well, I'll start, and then we'll, go down. So my name's Ann Mercereau, and, I chair this group. And I have the privilege of doing that. And, by day, I'm the Vice President of Human Resources, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Real Estate Services at Portland General Electric.
Thank you, Ann. I might have been a little bit remiss, back to that same subject matter of starting a little bit early. When Ann asked me, should we tell them it's required by state policy to have a work, in order for lunch to be paid for by the state, you technically have to have a working lunch. So we're trying to lean into and honor that. So my name is Todd Nell. I'm the Director of the Workforce and Talent Development Board. I think I know everybody in the room. Thank you for being here today. I'll toss it to you, Tom.
Before you do that, I'm sorry, I think Julie just walked in, and Julie, I just wanted to thank you for hosting us today. Lovely facility, and really appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem.
opening it up to us.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry for the security, but you can't go to the bathroom freely. That's about it. But yeah, no problem.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Tom Goodhue. I'm Executive Director for Oregon Building Congress and co-chair of the Workforce Readiness.
Tony Frazier, the Center Director at the Salem Rock Center.
Hi, I'm Wendy Popkin, Vice President at the Washington County Visitors Association, and I have the pleasure of representing the hospitality and tourism.
I'm Ken Madden. My company is Madden Industrial Craftsman and Madden Fabrication. Also, we're the proud manufacturer of Portland Moo, which is a public restroom that was created here in Portland. And we have a licensing agreement with the City of Portland to sell public restrooms around the United States, into Canada, and some other countries as well.
I'm Julie Lewis. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for Pacific Corp.
I'm Mac Pritchard. I run a regional job board, maxlist.org. We serve employers and job seekers in Oregon and Washington State.
Afternoon, I'm David Gerson, Director at the Oregon Employment Department.
Hello, I'm Venkat. I'm the Senior Director for AI Computing at NVIDIA.
Sydney King, and I'm the admin, one that pesters you with all the emails.
Hey, Martin, I'm staff with the Office of Workforce Investments and Support.
Julia Steinberger, I'm the Director of the Office of Workforce Investments at the HEC.
For Purcell, I'm the Director for Future Ready Oregon at the HEC.
Vince Porter, I'm the governor's, Economic Development Workforce.
I'm Senior Director of the Night Campus Graduate Internship Program at University of Oregon. On the board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Lopez. I am from BOLI, the Bureau of Labor and Industries, and I serve as the Executive Assistant to Commissioner Stevenson and Deputy Commissioner Giannantino.
And I am Sherry Dunn, and I'm the Vice Chair of the board.
So much more.
Yeah, well, that's all I can say.
Kaylin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, friends. My name's Kaylin Lane. I'm located out in Condon, Oregon. I'm a field coordinator with the Ford Family Foundation and proudly serve as the chair for the East Cascade Works board and on the kick here with Todd and the rest of the team. Thank you, Ann.
Mm-hmm. Did something else walk in?
I'm Carrie Weigel Delflin, Industry Strategy Consortium for Manufacturing.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Before we get started with our formal agenda, I just wanted to open the floor. Does anybody have any open items or updates that they'd like to share, or anything that they think would be beneficial for the group. This will be like sort of an open period for that.
So this is more of an ask, actually. So the Oregon Employment Department, we have an advisory council. It has a mix of employer, public, and worker representative perspectives. So we talk to them about rulemaking policies, what the agency does. We have some vacancies, including for the employer representatives. So if anybody wants to be on another group, or you know of somebody that does, let me know and I'm happy to share some more information. But we really do value getting those different perspectives as we look at the work that our agency does.
That's great. Thanks, David. What else?
Well, just to keep the theme rolling, the Vocational Rehabilitation Agency has a federal and state mandate that actually require a member of the Workforce and Talent Development Board, preferably a business person, to volunteer to be a board member of the State Rehab Council. The individual that was in that seat just rolled off. And I'm just tossing it out there to let you all know that's an opportunity that's available to lead services, programs, and investments that help both developmentally disabled as well as physically disabled folks across the state of Oregon. So if any of you are at all interested, please reach out to me by email and I can give you a little bit more context and tell you what the process involves. I think it's I believe it's a 3-year term. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And then just another friendly reminder, Department of Administrative Services requires us to complete annual training and assessment on sexual harassment as well as IT training. Those have to be done and submitted and recorded by DAS by the 31st of this month. So friendly reminder, I'm sure you'll get a few more other pings from Sydney as we grow closer to the due date.
But I remember getting those reminders last December. Are these new courses or are they the same?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the way it's set up is that they have to be taken every year.
Oh, so if you did it last year, you still have to do it this year. Okay.
So another question. Mine, when I get in there, has the classes you're supposed to take, right? Only have the IT class. It's telling me I'm complete. There's no link or connection for that other class.
If you have concerns, I would suggest you connect with Sydney because she knows everything. About that.
I can confirm that Sydney knows everything. I can confirm that Sydney held my hand for over 10 minutes.
I feel you. It's not intuitive.
It's not.
I hear
It's
other
not.
people say that because I thought I was the only idiot in the room. I don't mean everybody else. is.
All right, held my hand for you last year.
That from last year.
Yep.
I thought I was the only one bugging Sydney.
No, it's a theme.
She has amazing patience.
She does.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you guys. You guys are great.
No, Mac, we can ace the test, right? It's our second year, so.
Anything else? Updates you want to share? Right. Oh, we have 2 minutes before our meeting starts, so I would suggest if you'd like to have a quick bio break or get some water, now would be a good time to do it, and we will get underway in 2 minutes.
The restrooms are around the corner, so it'll be long. Round, go that way and around.
Yeah,
There-
sort of. But can you help me so I can wait for you?
I found it in the kitchen in the kitchen. Hot spot.
Down that way, like that.
For that email address.
To challenges.
Otherwise, I would.
Has it gotten any bigger, any harder?
You know.
Yeah, my cousin and,
Good.
her
Did.
That's why I was.
Thanksgiving and my.
It was, but
work and my other cousin.
just when it.
So I had people
Say.
Suicide.
Plus I have a company in Sydney said.
Okay.
I'm Julie.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
This is the first year my other cousin lives in Seattle.
In our program.
I glazed over something.
I
Hop in.
Good job, Shane.
No, I'm sure.
Just the nature of our space, community center.
feel, it feels the nerves, you know, and then last year I was really, we got trapped by the weather.
At our space, yes.
Well, I mean, for them, I was gonna ask how they want to connect it.
We went to the airport.
I would say yes to that.
Not doing any of that.
Yeah. It's not nice to suck her down.
Well, a friend of mine wants to go to, Alicia, you know, she wants to go to Leavenworth. Just come. And I drove last year with Carolyn. I really almost died.
Yeah.
So we're taking the train.
Oh.
And we thought that
Show up.
we could train.
Anybody?
Did you go up?
So like, when
Seattle?
there's a headline.
Side.
I'm sending them the shuttle, like, we're
People know the train station. Right. And there's, you know, that's types of basically long. Come on in and there's a civil service.
The prompt was, about a family that wanted to interrupt. Didn't.
Last time.
Yeah.
Were you the last one? I can't remember. It was-
Yeah.
It was, Mountain Street Pass was iced over. It had been completed. So, I mean, it was fresh ice, fresh, you know, it was insane. And then we got to lower elevation. Significant snow. Not, and I had snow.
Like yours.
Level.
Something
I'm
else.
not going anywhere without snow tires. People did that.
Yeah.
We
A
just-
couple last minute things that came up with it.
I'm not unused to it.
Before the end of the day.
I'm not used to driving on passes, like, with drops.
Exactly.
I got PTSD from that.
Gas, and then it'll go through, you can bring them a roll, but then I can get you a pre.
Okay.
A mistake. Yeah. It's a tricky one, you know.
It's my welcome.
And are we just passing things down? Because Todd already passed.
Be good.
On the council.
And I'll ask for
For me to approve.
Using.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that.
Well, I am kicking off the meeting as your chair. We'll go ahead and start. I do want to announce that we have some new members, which is really exciting. So please join me in welcoming Polk County Commissioner Craig. You already know Craig, but we're excited to have him join the group. Clackamas County Commissioner Martha Schrader is joining our team. And then finally, Melissa Drugi with Business Oregon is joining this illustrious group. So welcome to all three new members of the WTDB. Next up on our agenda is to see if we have any public comment.
I guess we.
Oh,
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm Senior Director of the Night Campus Graduate Internship Program. I've been talking to Todd Because we work with Fred Poole, who is on your board. He advises for our semiconductors track. It'd be good for us to let you all know that we have this great internship program where our students can continue for it and national lab partners. And in particular, our bioinformatics track is hosting an event in February for internships and to learn more about the program. So a little plug for what we're doing. And if you want to talk to me more about it, I can give you more information on how you can register for that.
Could you just repeat and clarify for the non-science people what track is?
Yeah, so, well, we have 5 tracks. Optics, polymers, semiconductors, molecular sensors, and bioinformatics. That last one is the science of using computational methods to analyze really large data sets in biology. It's a computer science track, but they also do a lot of biology as well. And they are the only track that is currently still looking for interns for this current cohort. But all of our tracks are really great opportunities. We work with industry partners also for forming curriculum, developing projects that they do in conjunction with different companies, and then of course the internship. I want to get the word out and ask questions at the break or afterward, and I can more information.
Thank you. And Cindy, I'm assuming you have the contact information, so if somebody wanted to reach out later. Okay.
I do.
Thank you. Great. All right. Any other public comment?
No.
Sorry.
And did you want the board members that are on the phone to introduce themselves as well? It sounds like you guys went around the room.
Sure, that'd be great. We'll start with you, Heather.
I'm Heather Fecht. I'm the director of East Cascades Works, the local workforce board that serves the 10 counties east of the Cascades. And I'm also on this board, I am the Oregon Workforce Partnership representative. Thanks.
Go ahead and just introduce yourself.
I want to know whose puppy that is.
So I'm Harris Ryback. I'm the Tarot Director for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I've been on the WTDB for, well, since February of 22, so.
Jackie?
My name is Jackie Wers. I am Executive Director of Donate Life Northwest, and I have been on WTDB for several years now. And I hope to recover from this cold sometime in the next couple of years, which is why I'm doing this remotely. Stay safe, use Purell.
That's a month.
Travis?
Hi, everybody. Travis Ryman, Superintendent with the Hillsborough School District.
Keith?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Keith Ozels, and I'm the director of the Vocational Rehabilitation Program. I've been on the board since, I think, going back to 2019.
Kathy?
Hi, everyone. Kathy Reynolds, Vice President, Talent Management for Legacy Health. Been on the board since 2018, I think. Good to see you all. And again, staying home, keeping safe, eating my throat lozenges.
Jim? Come back to you, Jim. And then
Jim
I can't.
Farr?
Okay.
Yeah.
I cannot.
There it is.
There we go.
Sorry, Jim Farr with the Oregon Employment Department.
And that is as far as I can see from here to the screen. So if you have not introduced yourself, if you wouldn't mind coming off camera if you're able to and introducing yourself. And if you can't come off camera, that's fine too. But please, for the rest of you, if you would introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Andy Friedman. I'm the Director of United We Heal Training Trust.
Anyone else? Okay. A little shy today, I guess. Okay, we're gonna move on. All right, next up on our business agenda is we have an opportunity to approve the minutes, but I'm not sure if we have quorum.
One shy.
Ah, it's always one. Okay.
Is that one?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's right. It's your homework assignment.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll potentially come back to that, presuming we have somebody else log in. All right, so,
I'm pleased to announce we have quorum.
hey, woo, son. All right, welcome. Okay, so I'm looking for approval on the September 8th, 2023 WTDB minutes.
So moved.
Seconded. Right. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Did anyone abstain? All right, the minutes are approved. Okay, with that, Harris, we are going to hear from you next. So Harris just introduced himself just a minute ago. Harris Ryback, Director of Tribal Employment Rights Office within Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. So recall that earlier this year, we started this practice at the beginning of our meetings to do a member spotlight. So today it's Harris's turn. So I will turn the mic over to you, Harris.
Thank you, Ann. I'll just say Tahayam Suslaksan Harris Ryback Nikanim. Good afternoon. My name's Harris Ryback. Like I said earlier, I'm the director for our Tribal Employment Rights Office here for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, located in Northwest Oregon, about an hour west of Portland. So if nobody's aware of where that's at. So just a little bit about Taro. So we are like an employment and kind of business consulting based program for the tribe. There are, of the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state of Oregon, there's 3 that have a tribal employment rights office, and that's the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde here on the west side of the state, the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation there in Central Oregon, and then the Warm Springs Indian Reservation in Eastern Oregon. So those are the 3 of the 9 that have a taro, but there are over 300 taros in the nation. So most tribes you can think of, Navajo Nation, some of those big tribes that people think of, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Osage, they have taros as well. So there's a lot of taros in the nation. I'm probably a little biased by saying that mine is one of the best, and but it is. Mine is one of under 10 in the nation that have a active MOU with the DOT. So Minnesota, there's a handful of tribes in Minnesota, along with the 3 in Oregon, that have an active memorandum of understanding with their Department of Transportation in the state. And what that does is that opens up significant employment opportunities for our clients to get on these federally highway funded projects and kind of work towards a tribal hiring goal. So Taro, it's comprised of a couple different sectors. I'll just run through them real quick. I asked Todd earlier, I said, how long do I have? I'm long-winded. You know, I could sit here for an hour and talk about the program, but so if a big cane comes and pulls me away, you'll know why. But so anyway, we have an Indian-owned business program that's part of our Taro office, and that is comprised of over 75 businesses. To my knowledge, it's one of the more elaborate lists of Indian-owned businesses in the state of Oregon, and that ranges everywhere from mom and pop construction companies to multi-million-dollar firms are on that list, and we help consult with them. There is an opportunity to engage in some business with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde as a Taro registered Indian-owned business. So that's a really neat part of Taro, and that part is open to all federally recognized tribal members. So we have business owners there from that are tribal members from all across the nation, but happen to be working in the state of Oregon, conducting business in the state. So another part that's a really neat section, one of 3 parts, is a skills bank program we have, and that one's also open to all federally recognized tribal members. And essentially, that program is the heart of dispatching workers to these ODOT projects, as well as these projects located within our reservation. And what that looks like is an individual comes to us, applies for our program. We can pay to train them, provide them with certifications, things like that. But then as these projects roll out, I think last year we had 20 projects on the reservation, and then we had another probably 20 with the state of Oregon. And so we dispatch those workers through our Skills Bank program to then fulfill a hiring goal on those projects. A couple of just really neat stats I pulled from, or I had some of my staff pull for this year. So this year in 23, we had supplied just shy of 19,000 hours on these projects. So that's basically 19,000 hours of individuals working that are dispatched from my program to reservation projects and ODOT projects. You have to remember some of the projects we're on. I don't know if you're familiar with, if anybody drives past Oregon City frequently, but the I-205 Abernathy project, that's one of the bigger projects that the Oregon Department of Transportation has ever taken part in. And that's under my program's jurisdiction. So we do have a tribal hiring goal on that specific project. So we're really excited and proud of that project in particular. But anyway, and then so that's the hours on the project. My favorite stat that I always like to report to the various boards that I report to is the wages. And that is the number of wages that are paid by contractors to individuals that are dispatched by our program. And the reason I love that number is because that is a number that is food in the fridge, shoes on the feet kind of number. And that was this year, it's right under $1.2 million in wages were paid to folks within Indian country through our program. As I'm moving on, another one is individual funding opportunities. That kind of catches everything else that we provide for training and certification. And we funded about $100,000 worth of those this year, ranging from CDLs, CNAs, various trainings, tattoo school. And that one is just open to Grand Ronde tribal members. So with all that, a little bit about myself. So I'm a Grand Ronde tribal member. I was raised in and around the reservation my whole life, been around the culture, been around the dancing and singing, and kind of know some of that stuff. So I'm really happy and blessed to be able to know some of that kind of stuff and pass that on. I graduated from the local high school, went on to get my undergrad in business from Western Oregon University there in Monmouth. At that time, I went to work for my tribe. And as I was working, then I went back to school and graduated magna cum laude from Eastern Oregon University's MBA program. So that's a little bit about my education. Worked with my dad's company between going to school and whatnot. He's an Indian-owned business, a construction company. So got a lot of good experience that way. Came to work for my tribe as a recreation coordinator. Helped guide that program and the various functions that were within that position. From there, I actually went on to be our tribal library manager. And in that role, I sat on a board that oversaw tribal libraries in the state of Oregon, which I was responsible for. And I also reported as the education department representative for the whole tribe during my time there. And then moved into my role that I currently am in as the director of our Tribal Employment Rights Office, where I oversee the program. And I'm just one of a few positions at the tribe. We have about 700 employees just on the government side that reports to Tribal Council and the Taro Commission. So, but yeah, currently, other than sitting on the WTDB, which has been awesome, I also serve as the vice chairman for our Housing Grievance Board. And then along with that, sit on a bunch of various other subcommittees, committees, work groups, both with the state and for the tribe. With that said, I'm just super grateful to be sharing a table with everybody. I try to make the meetings in person when I can. We did have a 3-month, we had a little boy 3 months ago. So that's kind of keeping me tied down to the house for the most part, especially on my remote days. But anyway, I'm just grateful to be sitting around the table. I would love to collaborate with other WTDB members. I've definitely worked aside from being on the board with some other members. So if any other members would like to collaborate or maybe think that your program could benefit from working with my program or whatnot, I'd be more than happy to discuss collaborative relationships moving forward. So anyway, appreciate your time and efforts and enjoy taking part in the meeting. Take care.
Thank you, Harris. That was really great. It was really wonderful hearing your history and learning more about the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And then I did want to take a quick minute, and Melissa, Drugi, we said we were super happy that you're joining the group, and I'm not sure that you were on, so I didn't want you to miss that we were introduced you to the group, and we're happy that you're part of the team as well.
Thank you, and I look forward to today's meeting in future. Sorry I had the wrong link and missed the chat for a moment, but Sydney got me hooked up, and hopefully next time it'll be in person as well. So glad to be here.
Welcome. Okay, we're going to get into the meat of our agenda. Todd, I'm going to send it over to you to talk to us about the strategic plan progress and the scorecard.
Great. Sydney, could you pull up the strategic plan, or Clay? Thank you. So we're about midpoint on our current strategic plan, and it's the end of the year. So we thought we'd give you a bit of a recap, level, and pretty brief in terms of progress. So many of you have seen this multiple times, front and center, in terms of our one-page front and back strategic plan, articulates our mission of equitable prosperity for all Oregonians, outlines our mission, position, values, and reputation that we espouse, being national leaders, conveners, connectors, results-oriented, and accountable, and transparent in the work that we are involved in. So on the back of the one-pager, there are 4 imperatives, a dozen objectives, and multiple initiatives. You can see a large number of green dots. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. Those definitely represent success and completion, and call-outs around those 4 imperatives. I did sort of want to highlight some themes here that you'll hear a little bit more on later in some instances. And so one of those themes is around data, which I'll also talk to after I go into the scorecard just briefly. There are yellows by numerous sort of data gathering initiatives and objectives that we are working on. Clay and I wanted to sort of flag those as, hey, there's concern here. We didn't put reds there because things are moving along, but some of those things are maybe moving a little bit more slowly than we had hoped. So I would encourage you, particularly if you are connected to some of these data chunks, to really focus on those and help in your role as a board member move that work forward. So for example, under the objectives under imperative 1, that 4th one, ensure the goals of prosperity 10,000 are met. That's called out specifically in detail, as many of you know, under Senate Bill 1545, Future Ready Oregon. Those key goals are our responsibility. If there are issues and opportunities where we find that maybe we're not on par or where we should be towards goals, we need to have some conversations about what we can do to lean into that and try and solve those problems so that we do our best to ensure that we meet those goals per the legislation. So a few other things I wanted to sort of touch on are around the second imperative of clear understanding of improved use and impact of the workforce system. Under the initiatives, again, where there's a first 2 bullets sort of talk about data. That 3rd bullet about hiring a professional marketing firm to consider new or revised system brands, communication strategies, and a messaging toolkit, and designate ambassadors from the workforce system staff, managers, and other stakeholders. We're currently in work around development of strategies and potential legislative concepts for the agency to potentially consider that would create space and potentially investment in order to be able to find budget for hiring that professional marketing firm. So those activities and efforts are in play right now. Again, remember, we're midpoint on 2-year strat plan, so look for more to come back from us on that. And we may reach out to you to ask for your advice and help on some of this as well. Moving into that 3rd imperative, That top one right there, I'll mention, since we have some new board members, I just met with Craig Pope about a week ago. He was excited and so very interested in becoming a member of the WTDB. He's already on the Continuous Improvement Committee, but he's excited about the onboarding process. So we are in good shape there. We have a few more things we need to do, and I'm looking forward to working through that with folks like Melissa, Commissioner Schrader, and Commissioner Pope. So I'll pause there. Any questions that folks would like to raise at this point about progress on the strategic plan at all?
I wonder if we're at the point, since we're halfway through, or maybe we should have done this at the beginning, but sometimes it's hard when you have a big wide open time frame in front of you. Are we at the point where we could start on the yellow items, maybe putting deadlines in front of things or target dates, and maybe to help help you all prioritize, but also we can all hold ourselves accountable to then backing into those dates of saying, okay, so since we said this is the date for this item, you know, what are the things I need to do upstream from that in order to be able to hit that date?
That's really good, Ann. And just so you know, and maybe as a reminder to some, Clay and I also, in addition to this higher level document, have a project plan with this and more in terms of deliverables and call outs with due dates. So
okay, great.
I'll make sure to go back and check and cross sort of reference the yellow bullets with that project plan and update accordingly. And then, yeah, I'll edit this and put some dates on there.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
You bet. So if we could move to the next slide there, Clay, thank you. As you know, this is the ever evolving WTDB scorecard. Again, I used green, yellow, and black means completed. So black is good. Yellow is just cautionary. So you can see we're doing well on the current, and these are in no way, shape, or form, again, final. I would consider this drafty. So obviously we're working on the strategic plan deliverables. I think we're on track. As I said earlier, we are working, as I said, on legislative concepts and strategies right now at the agency in Julia's Office of Workforce Investment Division. And one of the goals we have to incent more innovation in workforce and talent development is to increase funds for our strategic innovation grants. So we'll see how that plays out. Time will tell, and that'll either stay yellow or go to green in the next several months. We are, I think, doing well now on membership with the addition of our 3 new that we've talked about already. We have some others that are anticipated in the queue to come on board come February. So if all works well with Senate confirmation, we'll be back up in complement, particularly on business representation. So clearly we stood up the 3 consortium within the industry consortia Future Ready. We have finalized the key joint priorities, which I'll just review for your quick edification here in a second. And yeah, I think the rest are you've seen before. I think all is well there. Could you go to this next page, Cindy or Sydney? And these are the prosperity 10,000 measures. I think Heather Fick will say more about this later, so I'm not going to jump in there, but it is nice to note, I think, that already the goal around priority populations being served has been completed at 100% of what's called out in the legislation. Unless I'm mistaken, Heather, you can provide more information there. Yeah, okay, great. Any questions on this scorecard? Heather?
Me? Okay. Can you go back up, Sydney? I'm just wondering, how do we influence what's on this first page? Because I've brought this up multiple times on the local workforce board expended on training. I'm not sure that's still the relevant measure for this group. And I'm just wondering What does that mean, policy work group established? Is that going to inform kind of what that looks like, or? I was just
Yes.
wondering if you could give me clarity on that one.
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit in the last meeting, and nothing's really changed. There is a policy work group at the Office of Workforce Investments that's being led by Clay Martin. And there are numerous representatives from all of the typical workforce development related agencies. Heather, and I think that
Let your
where that
microphone, so, yeah.
There you go.
fleshed out will be in that work group. I think that it is all pretty much stood up, and I think the first formal meeting is slated for the first of the year in 2024. So more to come on that. I think that's where those discussions around what the particular sort of metrics potentially around training expenditures at the local board policy level will happen. Does that help?
I can follow up with Clay. Thank you.
Like we have an action item on that one. Yeah, Vince?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to ask about the note here about the Prosperity 10,000 data, best possible available. I know we had a really good discussion in the exec committee about data sharing and also finding pathways to being able to align placement, people being placed into jobs with some of these programs. And I was just curious if there's an update or further comment for the larger board about that.
Do you have a little bit of an update?
Yeah, I can give it, and if anybody else has other information, please share. But I think the goal is to use some of the wage data that the employment department gets when employers file their payroll reports to determine placement and earnings and things like that. It's something that a number of programs do with that wage data. We share that regularly. We've been waiting to get defined exactly what data elements are needed so that we can then finalize the contract, which does have to go through the state procurement process or contracting process, and then make sure that once we know exactly what is needed, that it is data that we can share. We share this kind of data pretty regularly. And I think that my understanding is that Work Systems, because they kind of administer iTrack, has been working on that definition of the data elements, and that had some other priorities that they had to get done, but that as of, I think, this week, they're working hard to define it so that they can then tell us, here's what we need in terms of data elements. Once we get that, from the employment department's perspective, we'll be able to say, we see challenges or we don't see any challenges. I will flag just one thing. If it requires some significant systems work on our side, we're about 3 months out from our unemployment insurance benefits modernization launch. So we are in kind of a code freeze where we can't make significant changes. Most of these kinds of data requests, we don't have to make any of those types of changes though. So we'll be able to dig in a little bit, hopefully very soon once we get that definition of what's needed.
Who is Jeff?
Benefits.
I'm sorry.
If you had a question.
I was just gonna ask who's on tap to provide the definition to come back to you? Do we have a timing on that? Like it'll be before the end of the year or?
I don't have a date. I know that it's being worked on, but I don't know what the ETA is for when we'll get that definition.
Work Systems is working on it. And so I believe that this one is actually pretty well underway. I feel from what I've heard, Oregon Employment Department and Work Systems data team have been working really well together. And it's just a matter of crossing some I's and dotting some T's and getting some final definitions. So I just wanted to reinforce what David was saying. There's issues with this measure beyond doing UI wage record matching, which is what David just described. And I'm happy to talk about it now, but I'm also on the agenda for later and was going to talk about it then. So I'll look to y'all. Do you want me to answer it now or in the P10K section at the end?
let's do it when we get to your section. And for those of you that weren't in that executive committee, the way that the discussion came about was just sort of, when resources are constrained, which they always are, if we can demonstrate success through these programs, we would have a higher likelihood, of being able to say, hey, we have this great program, et cetera. And right now we have leading indicators from the reporting out that says we've trained 3,000 people. We don't have the lagging success measure that says, as a result of that, 2,000 people now are working. And that's the number that we're after, because I believe, say, you asked us to do this, we did this, it makes it easier for people to give you money at the end of the day. But there's this systems issue. So my request would be, as an action item for the minutes, is that we come back with a date, a target date of when we're going to get that information over to David, and then David, you would have a response back, a date when you would say, and we'll get a response within, I'm making this up, 2 weeks to say, yeah, we got that, or no, it's going to require systems change. So we all know and feel kind of that positive pressure to keep this thing moving along. So that's the backstory on that. Jennifer.
Yes.
And I was just going to add that from the Future Ready Oregon writ large perspective, some of those definitions I suspect are driven by our Office of Research and Data, and our director for the Office of Research and Data should be here any moment. I'm waiting for her text because she'll be joining me for the presentation later in the agenda. So she may have updates following our broad Future Ready Oregon update in terms of from the HECS perspective, which potentially is driving some of the definitions, and how we are anticipating incorporating the employment outcomes data and wage data across all of the Future Ready Oregon investments.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And Jim, were you going to say something?
Yes, I can give, so we should have what we need from Work Systems within the next week. One of my staff members has been working with the person from Work Systems, and we were told that we would have it in the next week. We are following up with them every couple of days to see if there's anything we can do to help move it along a little quicker. So I hope within the next week we'll have what we need, and we can then start doing what we need to do on our end to make it happen.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I make one just, this is all great, and I really appreciate the conversation. The reason why I bring it up is, heading into 2025, like Ann was saying, everyone's going to be asking for money, and Future Ready in particular with one-time funding, that is going to need to have a very high bar to become more than just one-time money. And from, I think, my perspective and certainly my boss's perspective, that great data point would be how many people are placed in a job. And all the other data that we have that we're being trained and served is fantastic, but if we don't demonstrate being placed into jobs, I just think it's missing the mark.
I just want to throw out there, I don't think that this is an accurate representation. We are 30 or 40% into the longevity of this funding stream. So to say that we're at 7% placement is not accurate. We are only, you have to take the percentage of time that we are in. And that's what I'm going to explain later. We are more like at 30% placement rate, because you can't expect that the placement is going to meet this 75% when we've only served 3,000 people. It doesn't work that way. So I'm going to explain more later, but I'd like to talk about how this is represented in the future, because this isn't how I would represent it based on the longevity, like the time that we have the funding. You don't get performance the day you get a grant. It doesn't work that way. So I want to correct the record at the end of the meeting, but this is not how I would represent that performance. So.
Okay. All right. I think we will then, are you done?
Yeah, it's just, Clay, could you just scroll to the next slide really super quickly? I am. So just a reminder to pay attention in your packet. If you haven't had a chance to look at it prior, these are the agreed to approved joint priorities across the system we'll be focusing on for the next several years.
Okay, that's a great, thank you for that. That is a really good call. Those are very important. Okay, next up, we have Kaylin Lane, who, she introduced herself earlier as, she's with the Ford Family Foundation and also the co-chair of the KIC, the Continuous Improvement Committee. I don't believe Patsy's with us today. So Kaylin, I think it's just you, to provide an update.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anne. And good afternoon, everyone. The Continuous Improvement Committee acknowledges the challenges that are definitely being brought up today around systems communications, data, and integrity. I'm pleased to announce that we are taking proactive steps to tackle these issues and work in collaboration. On January 23rd, we will be meeting in person to formulate a comprehensive work plan that this also presents a unique opportunity for all of us to contribute our ideas, identify problems just like this, and collaboratively devise creative solutions. Also, not only solutions that are going to help us today, but 10 to 15 years from now. We need to make sure that, especially the systems that we're creating, aren't going to be out of date next year when we're looking to hopefully continue the second year of the WTDB. So just want to welcome your voice to the KIC, raise your concerns. This is a safe place to make sure that we are coming together and really representing our local workforce boards and being a voice for our communities. And are there any additional thoughts that you have or anything that you want to mention? I know at our last KIC meeting, you really had a lot to say around the data.
No, I mean, I feel like I kind of said it a few minutes ago. It's just, you know, really using data to tell our story, and being able to demonstrate results, because as I mentioned, resources are constrained. And so I just, and then, I mean, I think as a really nice side effect, it does for all of you who work so hard to do all the things that you do, it does give you a sense of accomplishment when you can see progress. So I just think data is really important to measure. And there are leading indicators and then there are lagging indicators, and people that give out money are probably most interested in the lagging, and then we're probably most interested in the leading, but we've got to figure out how to provide both of those. Okay, next up, thank you for that, Kaylin. Next up, Ken Madden, I think you're up, and I don't think Steve is with us today, is he?
No, I don't think he had another commitment that he was attending, so I wasn't sure if he was going to attend today, but it doesn't appear so.
Okay, so Ken's going to talk to us about the budget committee.
Sure, and appreciate that. And the budget committee, earlier this fall, this board approved the budget committee going forward, and as you know, past chair, I want to give some insight into why this committee I think is important to this board, and how I see it going forward into the future. Steve is the true chair. I'm just I'm his Robin to his Batman. But and Steve is really excited about the work of this committee going forward as well. But in prior administrations under Governor Kitzhaber, the budget committee did exist at that point. It did for some reason go away during Governor Brown's. And I have to say, you know, having been chair of this board for a while, seeing the changes when you go from one administration to the other can sometimes be frustrating. But in this case, this is where I think it's extremely enthusiastic, because I see Governor Kotek bringing a whole nother level of responsibility back to this board. I see that with the new membership of this board. And then also bringing clarity and understanding of how this board functions through this budget committee, I think is extremely important. It's a level of transparency that I think is helpful for this board moving forward as well. As a business person, I look at budgets in some ways to understand our path and our direction going forward. And I think that will give some clarity to this board as well. So I'm thankful and I appreciate the Governor and Vince's guidance on forming this committee as well. So thank you. We are in the early stages because of the holiday season. We haven't been able to have our first committee meeting, but we're working on that. I know Sydney just sent out another doodle poll to see if we can get some consensus on when we can meet. The staff has created a draft charter. Hasn't been approved yet, but that will probably be one of the first things that we do in our first committee meeting. That charter has several points that will give definition, and I will read those just so everybody is aware of them. Obviously hasn't been approved yet, and I didn't bring my reading classes with me, so please bear with me. So the committee will assist the Workforce Talent Development Board and the Office of Investments in the following ways related to the financial matters of the board. Budget development and review of analysis of the financial projections, historical spending patterns, anticipated revenue sources, resulting in a biennial budget, board budget and spending plan. Next budget item is to monitor on a regular basis the implementation of the approved budget, identifying potential budgetary shortfalls or surpluses and propose adjustments as necessary. The budget recommendations and biennial board budgets for the Workforce Talent Development Board for approval. So this is, and I'll be honest, this draft bullet points is a greater responsibility than we had under Governor Kitzhaber. So I see this committee actually having more teeth than in prior boards. So again, I think another nod to this administration for that type of leadership. The other bullet points that we're going to be reviewing are review and analyze the financial projections, historical spending patterns, and the anticipated revenue sources to make recommendations for a biennial budget and spending plan. Collaborate with relevant departments and committees to facilitate alignment between budget priorities, workforce development goals, monitor the implementation of approved biennial budgets and fiscal performances. This is a word out. Workforce programs against the targets and relevant WTB score metrics. Identify potential budgetary shortfalls and surpluses. Propose adjustments as necessary. Review the assets, financial reports, and facilitate transparency and accountability in financial management. Recommend budget allocations for various programs, initiatives, administrative functions based on strategic priorities, reasonableness, efficiencies, and available resources. Regularly review and recommend revisions to the Oregon's Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, funding formulas for adults, youth, dislocated worker programs. Evaluate and recommend funding levels for new workforce and development workforce programs, projects, initiatives, considered potential impact and return on investment. So those are the initial proposed directions that the committee is working on. And again, I would assume those will all be passed when we pass the draft charter at our first committee meeting. I should have people in this room who are on the committee, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. I know Ben Katz won. We and Ann, obviously, and I think Sherry is also.
And I think there are a couple of members, we're a couple members short, which we would have as a second agenda item on that first meeting, Ken, who might we think of that could come into the group to help with that budget committee charge.
Yeah, and I should ask, do we need additional members, do you think? We get it.
Well, we can have a conversation, I think, and sort of sort that out.
Just for, respect to everybody in the room, if you are interested in joining our committee, please let Todd know. We'd love to have you. This has been a passion of mine for a while, I guess because I'm a financial guy and I believe in that, but I also love the transparency that this committee will bring. So again, I welcome your input and thoughts, and if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to take it. I'm just, again, fill in for Steve, but I think Steve's going to be a great chair.
Right.
how often do we intend to meet?
Oh, good question. That was actually in my notes from, from that. Initially, we're planning on meeting monthly, but then after that, I assume the process will slow down way down. I would expect quarterly.
Any questions, comments, or volunteers? Right, thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, our next agenda item is to have an update from Tom on the Workforce Readiness Committee. And then at the conclusion of that, since we are a quorum, I'm assuming we still are. Love it. Don't roll off the meeting, please. We're going to look for approval on the reports. We can send it to the governor and the legislature. So with that, Tom, I'll send it over to you.
All right, thank you, Ann. Just want to as you were talking about meeting monthly and then going quarterly, we meet monthly and then meet weekly instead. So this has been a very active committee, to say the least, and we find ourselves in a lot of different places. If you've all had a chance to look at the report, I don't know, Sydney, do you want to bring it up?
Gladly.
Would you bring it up?
Thanks, Sydney.
The first page really is a kind of a restatement of the challenge that the Workforce Readiness Committee has. And of course, we borrowed from Ken a nice quote to put in there that I think really talks about what employers are looking for. When you go to the second page, we actually start off with a graphic, talks about the start back in 2018, where there was a talent assessment, and then it shows you kind of the iterations that we've gone through. At one time, this was the essential skills, essential employability skills committee. We've now, in fact, broadened that to Workforce Readiness Committee because we believe it's broader than that, and it also leaves us open to be able to expand into things that seem to develop every time we sit down for a meeting and start talking about what workforce preparedness is all about. We've, again, graphically, we illustrate a lot of things here, talk about the basic skills, employability skills, technical skills, and credentials, which are all part of what we're trying to bring together. We have then highlighted the opportunities moving forward, getting back to data-driven. That's part of what we're trying to do, is look at opportunities that are out there and try and make connections for people that are looking for jobs so that they know how to proceed through the process. Next page actually shows the different types of partners. We are very, very diverse on all the stakeholders that have been contributing to this plan. Obviously, we always are looking through a lens of equity, and then we go down to recommendations. One of the things that we were able to do, as you can imagine, just like this board, it's full of volunteers, and we have an awful lot of things we're trying to get done. So we were able to partner with Department of Education and Lynn Benton Community College to actually bring on a project manager that's funded through the end of September to be able to work through our goals and objectives that we've established for the committee. So if you just read through this a little bit, you'll find out a lot of different things that we're doing. I'll save time by not reading through all the line items for you. I think that there's pretty self-explanatory, but I will just personally say that I'm very passionate about the types of things that we have done. And part of what we originally recognized was that there were pods all over the state that were basically doing a lot of this work. So the goal was to bring them all together, to get them to collaborate and try and keep the different things that they were trying to relate consistent. So we weren't all over the map, and yet we allow each one of the different groups to have their own autonomy that works specifically for the groups that they're mentoring. So that in a nutshell, unless Todd, you want to add anything on top of that?
No, I thought you did a great job, Tom, and just hats off to you and Charlie Hopewell, who couldn't be here today. He came down, he texted me very early this morning saying he sends his regrets, but he's quite ill, thinks he might have pneumonia. Was headed to the doctor hospital, I'm not sure, as early as he could get there this morning. But again, I don't think without you two as co-chairs, we would have accomplished as much as we did. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I mean, we work pretty hard at this thing, and even when we don't have meetings, Charlie and I are talking all the time as to how to keep kind of herding the cats and moving them forward all the time. So
Looks like Travis has that question.
Travis has got something. Travis, you've been active.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to give you a shout out and appreciation. A couple weeks ago, Charlie was with us in Washington County at a manufacturing consortium talking about the good work that's going on with employability skills. And then, Tom, I was thinking about you and Charlie. On Tuesday night, we had a school board meeting where our teachers were proposing 2 new courses, one in bioscience and one in veterinary science. And our board approved a construction course. All 3 of those presentations included the connection to Oregon employability skills that are handled within those courses. And that's just becoming standard in our school district. So that culture is taking root. Thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Travis, because it takes leadership from the top down in order to make a lot of this stuff happen. And just working with different administrators and getting them on board with the concept and the ideas actually makes it work at the ground level where teachers are actually using the process. So thank you.
And I'm pleased to also let you know that, you know, you may or may not be aware of this, but each year in this meeting, we give out what's called the Driving Force Award to illuminate just some incredible leadership, passion, vision for the work. And you guys have clearly demonstrated that. So I'm just pleased to let you know, Tom and Charlie, if you were here, that you were being awarded that, and you'll receive a certificate signed by the governor from Sydney shortly. Yeah. Really, really well done. I know that at PGE, I've had an opportunity to interact with these guys, and they are passionate, persistent. I mean, it is incredible work, and it takes drive. And so this is well deserved. Okay, so we are looking for a motion to approve the workforce readiness report so that we can distribute that. So I am looking for a motion.
Making a motion.
Right. Love it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
One opposed? And did anyone abstain? All right, congratulations. Okay, next up, I am very excited to introduce my colleague, Brooke Brownlee from PGE. She is here to talk about some work that is being led on the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Brooke.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Many friendly faces in the group and online. I am Brooke Brownlee, as Ann noted, and I work in our new community engagement team, and I lead our work around labor, workforce, and supplier diversity engagement. And the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition is the product of Ann and I's collaborative effort around building the clean energy workforce in the state. And I think I should have some slides. I am all about having an informal conversation. So as I go through, if there are questions, please feel free to interrupt me and ask me. And we can go ahead to the next slide, please. So a little quick background on the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition. Back at the end of 2021, after House Bill 2021, the 100% Clean Bill had passed the legislature, we started having some conversations with several of our other partners about, okay, we got a lot of work to do. Now, how are we actually going to do it? And unique, I think, to the energy sector in a way that you don't see other sectors is we really rely on a lot of other people to do their job well for us to do our job well. And so we are not hiring directly folks who are building our renewable energy projects, right? Like we are hiring contractors who are hiring workers to build our renewable energy projects, as an example. And so we knew that we needed kind of this more collaborative effort And then we are also in this massive period of transformation within the energy sector. Folks that have the same job for 40 years and have retired from a utility are not going to be able to do that now. We're not going to have somebody in 40 years whose job will look the same as it does when they get hired today. So kind of the combination of all of those things, historically, we at PG have done our own hiring, Pacific Power has done their own hiring, et cetera. And we knew that to really create the momentum that we needed in order to build this workforce, we had to do a more collaborative across the state approach. So I will not read this to you, but in essence, our goal and mission is to really create this collaborative engagement where we are creating an equitable and inclusive workforce in the clean energy sector in this state. And we define clean energy as kind of all things connected to the decarbonization of the electric sector. And in particular, that equity focus is incredibly important. If you look at our data in terms of women and people of color representation compared to other industries, we're woefully represented in women and people of color. And that's due to a whole host of things, you know, systemic racism, traditional hiring practices, et cetera. And so we really wanted to make sure that that was a focal point, because ensuring that folks have equitable access to be able to be part of the clean energy transition was incredibly important. And then the vision is something that the coalition collectively worked together about 6 months ago on really, when we're all said and done with our work, what does this work look like? Next slide, please. One of the things that was really important when we created our work was grounding people in these guiding principles. And we reiterate these before every single meeting. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One, because this is looking at a different way of doing workforce development in the state and a different way of doing things than we have historically. It is less about the employer and it is more about the sector overall, right? So it's really work for the common good. We as an employer will benefit from it, but the focus is really on how do we collectively work together. It's also really important to acknowledge that there's really good work already happening in pockets of the state. So we are not intending to recreate wheels that already exist, but really to elevate the work and fill in the gaps. When we started, there was some concern by some of the partners that, you know, oh, we got this. Like, we're already doing this really well. We don't need to do this, right? But they may be doing their part really well in a specific spot in the state, and we need that really good, really well throughout the state. And so we've really worked over the last 18 months to really ground folks in that continual reminder of this is a collective work product that is going to benefit everyone in the state. I am happy to say that we have had really good success with this model and regrounding folks in that. The third one around seeking opportunities for funding, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the removing barriers piece is really incredibly important, as I noted before. And this is also recognizing that this is not a one size fits all approach. I think at Workforce, we want to look for that one size fits all because it's easy, right? Like, here's the easy button. This will remove this barrier. And that's not how it works in reality. One person may need work boots for a job site. Somebody else may need help with childcare, right? So we really need to be looking across the board and leveraging the feedback that we receive directly from workers. I think that's another challenge we've had in the workforce space in the past, is that we assume a lot of things, like we've talked to one person and this is their experience, so that has to be consistent across the board. And that's often not the case. And so really making sure that we're elevating the voice of the worker and that we're being mindful of what that experience looks like is incredibly important. Next slide, please. I also will not go through this whole list, but it is in your packet. We have more than 60 different organizations participating across the state. We were very intentional as we worked to build out this list, and I will note that this continues to evolve and change as we continue to have conversations and we identify additional voices that aren't at the table. We've employed a model of nothing about me without me. So if there is a voice that is connected to the clean energy sector workforce that is not at the table, they need to be at the table.
You should say that again. What'd you say?
Nothing about me without me.
All right. Just want to emphasize that.
It's very important. So we have workforce investment boards, we have union labor, we have training providers, education providers, employers, utilities. It really crosses the whole gambit of folks. We have several state agencies, and I think when you look holistically across this list of various different organizations, the amount of expertise that you have and collectively within this organization is amazing. You have folks who work nationwide and have experience from various different parts across the country. You have folks who only work within like the city of Portland and kind of everywhere in between. And what that allows us to do is be able to leverage their expertise and experience into creating this work plan that will eventually get us to where we need to go. Next slide, please. So when we designed kind of the coalition implementation framework, I should note that I'm also the chair of the Clackamas Workforce Partnership. And so not reinventing wheels is very important to me. Also, utilizing the local workforce boards in their role and what they do is also very important to me. And so when we designed it, that was kind of the intent. So the way that we look at the work that we're doing, the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition brings together all those partners, and it really looks at the overall policy and program and development and kind of implementation. I call it like the toolbox. What are the things that are working across the country or the state or regional that we can say, these are the best things to do? And then on the state agency side, working with our state agency partners, is there system-wide alignment that needs to happen? Is there legislation that needs to pass in order for us to be successful? Are there policies that we need, et cetera, in order for this ball to move up this very big, large hill? And then in terms of implementation, we're really looking to our local workforce boards to help us. So they have the relationships, they have the partner networks already in existence, and they're funding and they're working. And so leveraging all those program partners at the local workforce board for actual implementation. And a perfect example of this, we were just meeting with one of our Oregon tradeswomen partners a couple weeks ago, and they gave a perfect example of in Eastern Oregon, a lot of the folks in Eastern Oregon know how to use hand tools because they work on farms and they use them in their daily life. Somebody in the Portland metropolitan area may not have that same experience. So tailoring a training program to understand that in Eastern Oregon, you may have less folks who need this hands-on skills training with a saw as an example, but somebody within the Portland metropolitan area very well may need that, right? And so recognizing that there are regional differences, but that holistically you're looking for the same goal. Next slide, please. So over the last 18 months, as I noted, we've been building the table. We have established subcommittees, and this is really important because we have a variety of interests that are at the table, as you saw. And so we have really created a space for people to engage where they best can and what makes the most sense for them. We also recognize that everybody has a lot of things that they're doing and life is crazy and busy, right? So we want to make it really meaningful and use people's time in the most meaningful way. So we've established these 6 subcommittees. 4 of them are up and running. 2 of them we're hopefully, fingers crossed, going to get up and running this month. And they're really focused on the areas in which we see the most need to really collaborate partners around. Education is really focused on kind of the whole continuum, starting in elementary school all the way up through employment and training. What does that look like? How are we teaching about the clean energy sector and the jobs that are available, career learning experiences, et cetera. Transportation electrification is about transportation electrification. Energy efficiency, this is a whole new kind of space and an existing space. And then eliminating barriers and expanding access is really looking at those barrier reductions. We developed a strategic plan. This was really important to our work, and I will call out the Hillsborough Manufacturing Coalition. When we started our work, we did a lot of engagement with other folks, both around the country and locally, who had pulled together similar kind of coalition models. And one of the things they recommended was have a plan. And I work from a plan, so this was like music to my ears. So we built this very collaborative process, and it was based on short, medium, and long-term goals. And the short-term goals are identified to be completed within a year. Medium term are between 1 and 3 years, and then long term are 3 to 5 years. And in the appendix, you'll see all of the goals that have been outlined as part of our strategic plan. Within each of those goals will then be action items in order to achieve those. So we have built out the action items for each of our short-term goals, and I'm very happy to report our meeting last month for the end of the year. We are well on our way to achieving all of the short-term goals that we've identified, which is really awesome. And then we also identified kind of best practices, again, across the country and from local partners. We're collaborating closely with the Future Ready Oregon Industry Consortia. I sit on the technology consortia. We're finding ways to make sure that we're aligning with what others are doing in the state, again, because there's economies of scale and really thinking about this. And what is not a great experience is for someone to be participating in one coalition and then participating in another coalition, and they're saying two different things and doing two different things for the same problem. That's not helpful. And then we're applying for funding to support our work. We were selected as one of 20 teams across the country to participate in the Jobs for the Future Green Jobs Regional Challenge. We just applied for phase 2, which will take down those 20 teams to 10. And then the phase 3, which will be in 2025, will have 5 teams around the country. So we are, fingers crossed, going to make it all the way to the end. And that's really focused on training within the clean energy sector. That is their goal. And then we were also selected for a $3 million U.S. Department of Labor grant. Heather is one of our project partners on that one. I am very excited about this project. It will be kind of a twofold project. It's over 3 years. And one portion is focusing on those who are incarcerated and providing a pre-apprenticeship training program with 3 of our union partners. And then upon release, those folks who graduate the program will either have direct entry into that apprenticeship program or preferred entry into an apprenticeship program. And I have spoken to the 2 cohorts of women who have done this program, who used Future Ready Oregon dollars to get off and running. And these women are amazing and they're so excited. And the questions that they have about the clean energy sector and the excitement that they have around it is amazing. So this program, this funding will continue that program at Coffee Creek and then expand the number of cohorts that they can serve. And then also will expand it to additional facilities in Central Oregon. And then the second phase is on really focused on opportunity youth and engaging kind of career awareness, career learning experiences. And that will be deployed through East Cascade Works and then through Clackamas Workforce Partnership. And those 2 workforce boards were chosen because of the locations of those correctional facilities that had been previously identified by our union partners. Next slide, please. So our subcommittee kind of implementation framework, I mentioned kind of the subcommittees previously. What our goal here is to really have SMEs or subject matter experts sit on these subcommittees to really inform what are the key skills, critical roles, challenges to hiring, et cetera. While we have some of the same folks that sit on the big coalition that sit in these subcommittees, we also have a lot of differentiation. So we have, you know, a company where you might have somebody who just works in transportation electrification as an example for a utility, and they sit on the transportation electrification subcommittee, but they don't sit on the bigger coalition, and somebody else from their organization sits on the bigger coalition. So we really intended and designed these in a way that they're flexible to allow for those subject matter experts to come in, provide that extra level of detail and feedback. And then that rolls up into this kind of identification. And we've been doing this work with the subcommittees that are up and running right now around kind of who are your target audiences? What do you want them to think, feel, do? And then how do you build an action plan around that? So if one, as an example, in our education subcommittee, we've talked about parents and having parents understand that jobs in the trades are really good paying jobs. There's low barriers to entry. There's all these opportunities. And the narrative that had existed in the education system for a long time was if you don't go to college and you don't get a 4-year degree, you are not going to get paid well and you're not going to, right? Like that has been the narrative, right? So how do you flip that to actually be like, nope, these actually are really good paying jobs and they're a great opportunity. So those are the types of things that we're looking at that will inform how we do our branding, how we do outreach and engagement with various populations. And then the Reducing Barriers Subcommittee will also take that information and same thing, the part of their really important critical work, and this will kick off next year, is doing some listening sessions around the state to really hear directly from workers. What are you experiencing and what are the challenges? And also, do you even know about the jobs that are available in the clean energy sector? Because I think the answer is likely no. We have, Anne likes to say we have a branding problem. My undergraduate degrees are in marketing and advertising, and I can definitely confirm we have a branding problem. Most people, you know, are not talking about a job in the clean energy sector when they're in elementary school. That's just, it is not part of people's day-to-day narrative. And so we really need to help flip that on its head. And it's not just about working for utility, right? There are so many other jobs that are connected to the decarbonization of the electric sector that are not just working for the utility, and we need all of those jobs. Next slide, please. I kind of went over some of this already, but here's an explanation of each of the subcommittees in a little bit more detail. When we convene the subcommittees, we initially kind of created our own, what we thought the subcommittee would focus on. And then as the subcommittee gets up and running, they really take a look at this to say, does this really meet where we think it needs to go? Or do we need to add extra things or take away extra things? Our energy efficiency subcommittee made some modifications to theirs, the transportation electrification subcommittee also. So we really tried to allow for the subject matter experts within these areas to really modify how they felt that they needed in order to be successful. Next slide, please. And then the building and maintaining the system subcommittee is really going to be focused on the traditional kind of utility related jobs and then the construction sector that supports the building out of those jobs. Some of that work has already been taken on by the education subcommittee, recognizing that we needed to get started like yesterday, but that work will start, like I mentioned, hopefully this month. And then modern grid's going to be very important, and that's really going to be looking at all those new and emerging technologies. There are things that we know will be a solution to meeting our 100% clean goals in 2040 that we don't even know about yet. I like to say when I started with PGE 6 years ago, some of the technology that was being talked about 6 years ago was not cost effective, likely unfeasible. And today you see those in utility RFP processes and projects that they're moving forward with to build. So just in a 6-year period of time. And if you think about electric cars, that's another great example. Just the range difference, right? Just in between the last 6 years, what you saw in a Nissan Leaf compared to what you see in a Tesla or a Rivian today is significantly different. The Nissan Leafs, I think, had like 70 miles, if I remember correctly. It was real bad. And now you're looking at like 300, 400 miles. So there's a lot of things changing in a very short amount of time. Next slide, please. This is really looking at what that process looks like. And we have the subcommittee leadership structure is intended to have subject matter experts be the leaders of those subcommittees. So they're working in partnership with Ann and I, but they're really leading kind of what this looks like in terms of development of the agenda and the area of focus, et cetera. We have tried to keep across all the subcommittees, the process and the work plan consistent. And that's really to ensure that we have consistency across these different areas, which then helps us roll it back up into that larger strategy. So there is definitely some subcommittees have more areas where they want to focus on or less areas, et cetera. But in terms of how this information all rolls up, it's the same. Next slide, please. And then you can keep going, Clay. And then where we're going. So identifying additional funding resources is one of the big ones. One of the things that we know that we need, and we included this in our phase 2 grant for the Jobs for the Future, is a statewide market assessment that looks at the policy drivers of House Bill 2021, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the IIJA. We know that that will drive additional jobs that are needed in order to decarbonize the electric sector. And there is no one place that takes all of those and puts them into one. So the Biden administration had job numbers that were broken out as part of the passing of those 2 bills. When we were talking about House Bill 2021, there were also discussions about what jobs could look like, but there's nothing that combines all that together. And what we know, just for an electrician, for an example, the state economic office projects by 2031, it's going to be a 20% increase. And with job vacancies, it's like 14,000 people. That's just electricians, and that doesn't include those other things, which the decarbonization of the electric sector will definitely need electricians. So this is really going to inform not only the work, but also most importantly, to ensure that we're not overtraining in areas where there won't be as much job growth anticipated, and that we are training enough in areas where there will. And that has, you know, historically, when big buckets of money came in from the federal government, that was a problem, right? You train up a whole bunch of people, and then when those dollars went away, so did all those programs. And so we want to really avoid that, because we have too much work to do and not enough time to do it in, to not have enough people trained to do it. The second piece around listening to the voices of workers, I already talked a little bit about that, but this is critically important. We don't know what we don't know. And so making sure that we're really going throughout the state to listen to what the experiences are of someone in Eastern Oregon versus somebody in Southern Oregon versus somebody in Astoria, and really understanding how we need to make sure that we're thinking about our planning and our engagement so that it resonates and is working for all parts of the state. I already talked a little bit about expanding the table, and then really implementing actions to achieve those short-term goals. The funding that we've received from those 2 grants has been immensely helpful. Portland General Electric, along with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, also was selected for a Department of Energy grant through the GRIP program that is rebuilding the transmission line from Madras to Salem. And we have included a whole bunch of workforce and education-related components in that grant. And so that'll all connect up with the Clean Energy Coalition. And that was really intentional, again, going back to how are we making sure that we're braiding all the resources together in a really meaningful way. And then the last piece I'll just note here is really around the building of career pathways. This is the critical piece that we have been missing. And what we have talked about at the coalition is not focusing on individual jobs, but really about skills. What are the types of skills that you need? And then how does that transfer to jobs? And then from there, what training do you need in order to do said job? And then who are the employers in Oregon who offer that job? And that will allow for the flexibility of, like, if you have these 5 base skills, you can do these 3 different jobs. And then as jobs evolve and change within the sector, folks are being trained in areas where they have a multitude of options to them, rather than being pigeonholed into one job in the sector that may go away in 5 years because of the evolving nature of the sector. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions anyone may have.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment if you need some help. I just happen to also be the executive director for Oregon ACTE, so that's all the career technical education teachers in the state of Oregon.
We would welcome your participation.
And I think Travis would probably start a program at his school.
Yeah, we actually have a sustainable design program at Liberty High School. We have a building that has sustainable agriculture and sustainable design integrated. And so I would love to connect you with them.
That would be awesome. Heather?
I just need to do a shout out to Brooke because she is phenomenal. And I got to see her in person in Warm Springs last week, and it was wonderful. And the whole PGE team was out there. And that project is so exciting. And there's just so much good energy happening that I just wanted to really appreciate her. She's working really hard and being highly effective.
Question. Hey, Brooke, thank you for that. When I think about clean energy, I think about wind, solar, hydro, to some extent nuclear. And so the skill sets for these are really diverse, right? So how do you fold that in to your subcommittee organization and also to training programs?
Great question. So that is part of how we have designed the subcommittees and through the identification of kind of the top broad skills that we know that we are going to need and the top careers that we know that we're going to need. That job study that I mentioned is going to be really helpful in not overtraining. Do we have the right folks? As an industry, we already have a pretty good idea on some of the things that are the most need. Construction workforce, without a doubt, hands down, we are going to need a whole bunch of folks in that space. The line side, we know we're going to need that. We're going to need tree trimmers, right? There's some very clear things. So as part of the subcommittee work over the last couple of months, they've been identifying the careers that they want to start focusing on for those mapping out. And then as we go and drill down, we'll get further and more granular. But the idea is that we're starting with the ones who are most needed first, mapping out with our education partners, what do those opportunities look like? Is it an apprenticeship program or a college degree or whatever? And then what does that employer look like on the other side, and having employers help inform what they're looking for. I think also one of the challenges that we have kind of across the board is not all employers hire entry-level positions. In fact, a lot of employers don't hire entry-level positions. They're hiring mid-career, and that has to be a change in how we do our work, because we can't expect to make this like big revolutionary change within the clean energy sector and hire everybody mid-level career and expect that we're going to be able to do it. We're not. So that's really an opportunity for us to think about how are we reimagining what the workforce looks like, providing training opportunities, providing when I started my very first job out of college, I worked for a printing company. I knew this much about printing. And I started out at a wage, and then they gave me a whole list of things that I had to learn. And then I got to move up and I got a better job and I got a better pay because I had learned these things and demonstrated those things. I think we need to have that, mindset, almost like an apprentice, mindset for all types of jobs, because that's going to allow us to be more successful and it's going to reduce barriers. And that is one of our biggest challenges. We expect people to have all this experience. And if you don't, then you're out, right? And that's not going to create the environment that we need.
Mentioning that, are you looking at apprenticeships and internships?
Yes. So apprentices are very key, and our union partners obviously have that model, right, with the traditional. But we're also looking at, are there other areas where that could work, where we haven't historically had an apprenticeship model? There's certain careers that we need, but the pay isn't that great. So how can we think about like using those as an apprenticeship year and then having them jump off to other careers that do pay higher? So you're still filling that workforce need that you need, but you're also having people learn at the same time to other careers. So there's definitely discussions about what that looks like. And then also really expanding to career learning experiences for high school students. That's something that I don't think we do enough of. And Anne is famous for saying this, the things that get you fired, not the things that get you hired. Those high school years are really important. I worked at Subway when I was 15, and let me tell you, I learned a lot of skills about like not yelling at customers, right? When you're like, you already told me you didn't want the mustard or you did put the mustard and then now you don't want it. I can't take it off, right? Like, but seriously though, I mean, those are skills that I think are really important, but also to explore, like, is this the career pathway that I actually want to do? I would not be where I am had I not had an internship when I was in college. I worked for the port for 2 years in community outreach. I went to school for marketing and advertising. And I was like, I'm working for an ad agency. That is what I'm going to do. And that was a pivotal moment in my career, and it completely changed my trajectory because I was like, this is what I love. I love working with people. I love doing this work. And it totally changed how my career pathway would have ended up had I not had that opportunity. I didn't even know that was a career opportunity to begin with. So I think the more we can expose kids to the multitude of things that they could do, you're going to have people who are finding a job that they're really passionate about. And those people are going to be much more productive workers than somebody who is put into a job they have to pay them.
I just want to mention something you brought up, which is that the employers are going to look for people who are mid-career. So the tech sector, traditional tech sector, had the same issue when trying to bring in people through training programs into tech. And one of the things they found was that employers really need a lot of support. So there needs to be a middle person between the intern or the apprentice and the employer to help the employer. It almost needs to be like a program ready for the employer to help them understand how to work, or else they won't do it, right? And so, if you can get employers who have a process of doing that, who could give examples or share with other employers or come up with what that scaling looks like. Because I think that is what flummoxed a lot of the tech to work programs. They were teaching people to code, but once they tried to get that job, they did not have the support or infrastructure when they got on that job to either keep it or flourish, and the employer didn't know what to do. So that piece I think is really critical.
That's a very good point. I could not agree more.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, Melissa.
Thank you. Brooke, thank you for this presentation. It was really interesting, and I have a couple of either comment or question. One, I hope you have room at the table for Business Oregon. We're very interested in this industry and tying conversations around workforce development into what investments we may be making now or in the future, I think is going to be key to some success. And was happy to hear you say things such as career learning and apprenticeships, because those are the kinds of conversations our regional development officers are having with companies as they look at expanding and growing. So thank you again, and I'll follow up with you offline, and maybe we can chat some more just about how Business Oregon collaborate with you.
That would be awesome. One piece I didn't note that I think is really important is we see this as an economic driver for the state. If we do this right and we are building the workforce here, I came from the Port of Portland, so I know of all of the economic development component piece of it. And this is how we do it, right? Like we build our workforce here and we can say to site selectors, we have a ready workforce, everybody is trained and ready, we have scale, etc. It becomes a really competitive advantage for the state. And I think in a way that other sectors in other parts of the country have really elevated themselves, I think this is our opportunity to do that here in Oregon.
Awesome. Well, Heather, I couldn't agree with you more in your comments about Brooke, and we are very excited to let you know, Brooke, that you've been selected for a Driving Force Award for your vision. And your certificate signed by the governor will be cute. Thank you so much. That was really terrific. Appreciate that. And before we head into our break, I just also, since we're on the recognition path, I thought it would be really awesome for people to hear about some successes that Travis has had late with regard to youth registered apprenticeship. Do you mind taking like a minute and then we'll head into the break, Travis, to talk about that?
Oh, wow. Sure. Thanks for the recognition. Oh, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I don't know how much folks know about the saga, but we've been advocating for a registered youth apprenticeship, and we have a registered youth apprenticeship for the occupation called Certified Manufacturing Technician. And our students go through a 2-year program at a high school in a CTE program. And at the end of their 2-year journey, including a lot of on-the-job training with local partners, they get a certificate that makes them a certified manufacturing technician, which is transferable to other states in the country, and is just an incredible accomplishment for a high school senior. Gyra Semiconductor and Toso Quartz are our 2 main partners hosting those apprentices. And recently we had an obstacle where it was said that an apprenticeship couldn't happen without students doing 2,000 hours of on-the-job training, and that's impossible the way that the students are attending school and also trying to hold down those jobs. And recently we figured out with our partners at BOLI that there is a statute that also says that if we propose that there be a competency-based apprenticeship, that apprenticeship doesn't need to have 2,000 hours, but instead demonstrated competencies. So we're going to reapply with the help of our partners at BOLI in March to have our apprenticeship reapproved as a competency-based apprenticeship explicitly, which it was the first time too. And we're going to have that program rolling full steam ahead. And that'll also pave the way for other school districts, even community colleges, to have youth apprenticeship be part of the game in Oregon in a competency-based way rather than having hours requirements. We can always choose to have hours requirements when they're appropriate. So thank you for letting me celebrate that success. And thank you for everybody in the room who asked a question, made a phone call, reminded someone of the purpose of apprenticeship and how teenagers are also part of our workforce system in the state of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And with that, we're going to take just shy.
I'm sorry, I just had to make one comment because I'll tell you, Travis, if we had more superintendents like Travis in this country in general, I think we would be a better nation overall. His foresight, his willingness not to give up when he has doors closed in his face is beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. So I have to get that out on the table because he sticks to it. And our company is working with other school districts to develop apprenticeship programs, and most of them have taken the path of least resistance and doing the non-registered approach. This to me is the gold standard, and my hat's off to them. So I had to do that.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Thank you so much, Ken. That's so kind of you to say. Thank you. Could you write that down and hand it to my school board? The thing about
I'm gonna tattoo it across my chest.
All right, we're gonna head into the break. Please be back by 2:45 and we'll hear from Future Ready Oregon.
Okay, welcome back. We are right on track with our agenda. Thank you very much, prior presenters. So up next, I'm excited to announce that we'll have a Future Ready Oregon progress report. So please welcome Jennifer Purcell, who's the Director of Future Ready Oregon at the HEC, and Amy Cox, who is the Director of Office of Research and Data, also at the HEC. So welcome, Amy. And Jennifer, welcome back. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Really good to be with you all today, and hopefully we've repositioned ourselves so you can see the front of us instead of the back of our head. I think Sydney has my slide. Somebody has my perfect. I'm gonna start us off today with a little bit of a primer, sort of some framing about Future Ready so that we all have similar language and starting point. And then I'm going to turn it over to Amy Cox, who will be walking us through findings from the annual report that is being presented to the commission next week. But before I do that, I want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to the Future Ready Oregon program team, many of whom are joining the meeting today. And we are just so fortunate to have a really, really fantastic group of grant administrators who are so committed to the implementation of this work, and industry consortia coordinators, one of whom is with us today, Carrie Weichel-Delaplane, who are really.
Sarah's on too.
No, I know many of the team, but Carrie's the only one here live and in person. Thank you for having my back, Todd. Yes. Really, really committed to advancing opportunities for a diverse workforce in Oregon, and committed to advancing opportunities, particularly in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. And we're just thrilled at this point, after roughly 18 months of implementation and standing up new programs, to have a nearly full team, but really wanted to take this opportunity to thank them for their hard work and dedication. And without them, even the slides would not be possible today. So, thank you all very much. I would love to, oh, you're moving faster than I'm ready for. As I mentioned, I'm going to provide some updates on the early implementation. I'm also going to give you an overview of the timeline so that we're really clear about where we're at in the process of implementing Future Ready. And then I'm going to highlight a couple of lessons learned as we start to think about informing future workforce development investments. Part of the for Future Ready Oregon is to do that, and some really early lessons learned. And then, as I said, I'll turn it over to Amy to dive right into this year's annual report. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as a reminder, Future Ready Oregon is a $200 million package of investments that work together to advance a more equitable workforce system, growing a diverse workforce, and increasing equitable prosperity and upward mobility through both grant making and strategic initiatives. There's sort of four pillars to the Future Ready Oregon investments. First, the program center engaging and supporting historically underserved and underrepresented priority populations. There are 10 populations that are defined in Senate Bill 1545. And additionally, the investments prioritize key sectors of our economy. So they focus on healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. There are a couple of programs that are broader. They're not limited to these three, but these are the focus of the majority of the investments in Future Ready Oregon. Additionally, the Future Ready investments couple education and training costs with wraparound supports and services. You'll hear more about that from me as well as from Amy, but really central to the investments of Future Ready Oregon are this idea that we need to center the needs of the whole individual in education and employment. And then lastly, Future Ready Oregon advances a shared leadership model, really investing in projects that demonstrate engagement by employers and industry leaders and education and training providers and community-based organizations and culturally specific organizations that really have trusting relationships and familiarity with the priority populations that the projects are serving. Next slide. All right. The coloring did not translate well, so I'll just name that for you all. Although the last time, I know, the last time I presented this, it was like red, white, and orange. It was very bizarre. This is close. So again, the investments are in grant making and strategic initiatives, but a couple of things I want to draw your attention to that really are critical is that in the short term, the intention of the Future Ready Oregon investments was to leverage existing successful programs, to take advantage of existing partnerships, existing administrative structure. You will see that through the year, the annual report data, that the initial investments, which were funded primarily with general funds, were intended to see outcomes in the short term, where the longer term investments are funded by federal ARPA funding. And the federal ARPA funding doesn't have to be obligated until the end of 2024, although that's coming at us very quickly, and then fully spent by the end of 2026. So it gives us a little bit longer runway to expand the partners that comprise our workforce system and really advance innovation in workforce training. And when we talk about innovation, it's really back to those 4 pillars that I just walked you through. The innovation is in the partnerships and in providing supports, both in offsetting the costs of education and training and wraparound supports and services. Let's see, I think I'll point out on this slide that the short-term investments are funded by general fund only and had to be spent by the end of the last biennium, June 30, 2023. And those included an initial investment in the local workforce boards through Prosperity 10,000, secondary career pathways training programs at our community colleges, awards to community colleges and universities to expand credit for prior learning infrastructure, and then the launching of our industry consortia. We also, through the federal ARPA investments, I apologize, the color is off here. Through general fund investments and ARPA investments, we are expanding registered apprenticeships, youth programming, and providing competitive grant funding through our Workforce Ready grant program. And then lastly, only funded through ARPA is standing up the work of our benefits navigators, and I'll speak about that in a moment. So next slide, please. I anticipate this will similarly be bold. Just furthering the conversation about strategy and the framing, right? We have these 8 programs. Some were intended to advance outcomes in the short term, some over the longer term. And additionally, we have grant programs and strategic initiatives. Again, you can see here the grant programs and then the strategic initiatives of the industry consortia and the workforce benefits navigators. The industry consortia really working to advance systems alignment and inform future workforce investment funding. And then the Workforce Benefits Navigators, which is a program that will be launched shortly by our 9 local workforce boards to establish pilot projects across the state where benefits navigators are increasing access to workforce development programs and services. And next slide, please. This one just further illuminates the partnerships that are involved in Future Ready Oregon, reminding you that Many of the investments are administered by the HEC, but we also have programs that are being administered by our enterprise partners at BOLI and the Youth Development Division at the Department of Education. The next slide is an attempt to show you where we're at in the process. So Senate Bill 1545 was signed into law in March of 2022, and we immediately hit the ground running to implement the general fund administered programs. Those included funding again to the local workforce boards, career pathways at the community colleges, an initial round of workforce ready grants that expanded capacity for community-based organizations and workforce service providers, and then an investment in credit for prior learning. Each year, the statute requires that the local boards provide an annual report on the investments through what's called the Prosperity 10,000 program. And then each year, the HEC is responsible for a coordinated report on the whole, the entirety of the Future Ready Oregon investments. We are now at the point where we're transitioning into the ARPA administered programs. We're about 6 months into that work. We have launched each of the industry consortia, healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. They are all beginning their work to inform the next round of sector-specific workforce ready grants, which will be available in early 2024. As I mentioned, we're beginning the work of launching our Workforce Benefits Navigator program. And very recently, we announced a second round of workforce ready grant funding, again, advancing opportunities in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. Additionally, the local workforce boards have an additional investment in Prosperity 10,000 through the ARPA award. And you can see then the ARPA investments will sunset at the end of 2026. Slide, please. I will leave you with a couple of thoughts about what we are learning from the Future Ready Oregon investments. And this is really consistent across all of the programs that are included in Future Ready Oregon. We're learning that flexibility is key. The flexibility of the Future Ready Oregon investments uniquely centers community-based organizations as equal partners in our workforce system. It allows for capacity building and wraparound supports as eligible activities, as well as providing low barrier opportunities for career exploration and credential attainment. And we are able as administrators to be agile and responsive. We look at this as a partnership, entering into a partnership with grantees, listening to partners and responding in ways that are meaningful both to the partner organization and the participants in the programs. Secondly, we've learned that the individualized supports and technical assistance in the administration of Future Ready Oregon has been significant. We've hired technical assistance providers to assist prospective applicants through the application process. We're building communities of practice and providing ongoing technical assistance and support to grant recipients. And then lastly, collaborative partnerships where community-based organizations, education and training providers, and employers and industry leaders are co-creating opportunities for economic mobility, educational attainment, meaningful employment, and career advancement. And so I highlight those three themes for you as I turn it over to Amy to walk us through the annual report.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon. It really is quite a pleasure to be here and talk to you about this. Partly because, no, maybe go back one. Partly because it's hot off the press. It literally was finished last night. So, and yet still that Microsoft table of tables wouldn't generate, but nonetheless. And also it's really exciting to be here because this is just a group of people whom we don't need to explain the value of the work to. And that's just really wonderful. This report, I want to speak to it just sort of on a very high level first and then talk about some of the findings. This report is really in some ways 8 or 9 reports. It's a large report, and that really reflects the fact that Future Ready Oregon is not a program, but as Jennifer illustrated really well in those slides, it's really a suite of programs, each of which has overlapping but particular charges, and each of which is on a very rapid timeline for implementation. And the result of that means that to write an annual report, which in some ways is a progress report, right, for something in such a rapid timeline, it brings sort of a couple things to the fore that we have to grapple with in our office, in the Office of Research and Data. And those are sort of assessing progress and assessing outcomes. And we'll start to talk about that in this year's report. But they're both very relevant. Sometimes people want only to hear the outcomes, which actually will be unfolding for years, right? If we have capacity building grants happening, the outcomes of the capacity building grant unfold over time. So part of what the report does, and I'll get into this, but just sort of expectation setting or framing, part of what the report does is it talks about the progress, and part of what it does is it talks about what we've found happening sort of with participants too. So I wanted to say that, and then I also want to say that my name is up here on the slide, but I am really in many ways a figurehead. We have a very mighty team in the Office of Research and Data who have spent many hours, not on this report only, but also on especially the data collection and the technical assistance to grantees for Future Ready Oregon. And that is something that has been challenging for grantees, but has really in many ways, I think, moved some of the fields of data equity forward around the kinds of data and the ways the data have been collected. So I won't go into that in too much detail, but I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, thank you, Clay. Next slide. This is a slide some of you may have seen. We put it together way last year, but it is our sort of guiding document for all of these reports. And that is that all of the work that we do around looking at Future Ready Oregon really asks these two questions that we view as very intertwined. Does Future Ready Oregon lead to greater economic security for individuals, for communities, for businesses, for the state? Does Future Ready Oregon improve equity, leading with racial equity across workforce training, employment, industries, career advancement, and I would say also post-secondary education, not only the training side, the education side as well. They're intertwined too, but nonetheless. We're still in many ways at this point in the Future Ready Oregon timeline on the left and the middle part of those lower three, but we're creeping into the outcomes area too, where we're looking at access for not only for individuals, for training programs, and for community partners who can, in many ways, effectively support or lead those training programs, but haven't been at the table of state funding. For practice, in terms of what is the experience of the individuals, the grantees, and the agencies in putting this suite of programs into place. And then the outcomes, who is engaging in these programs, who's participating, and what's happening with them. So next slide, please. This year's report, as I started to allude, focuses on sort of two sets of work, continued implementation progress for each of the 8 programs and as a whole, and initial outcomes. I want to just take a pause for a brief moment and say, especially for a program, or rather a set of programs that's on such an aggressive timeline, implementation is really important because it helps identify risks that could be happening right now that there's not time to course correct, 2 years later. So doing a single report after 4 years would miss that train, right? It's also really important because as the years go by, we will be looking at well, okay, which sort of set of different investments or different opportunities or different training programs works for which communities the best. And we want to make sure we understand the implementation so that we can interpret those final data the best, right? We can't do that if we're just remembering it from 3 years ago. At least I can't. And so we really want that documented well at this stage of the process. And then in terms of outcomes, this year's report looks at participation, who was participating, how does that relate to the priority populations in the legislation? How does it vary by program? What can we say when we take into account timeline? Because these programs are not being implemented all on the same day, but in a rolling fashion. And then grantees within a program are implementing in a rolling fashion. And what can we say about the services they're receiving? And are they completing them? And is that varying across those programs and groups? And then also, how does this connect with the broader economic landscape? So a lot of the inspiration for Future Ready Oregon comes from this historically declining labor force participation and low unemployment and high demand for workers. And what's happening there and how does that relate to what's happening in Future Ready Oregon? We use lots and lots of sources of data for this. I won't go into that. I've also listed the 10 priority populations down at the bottom, just as a refresher. Next slide. I'm going to give you the most high level of outcomes. This is a report that has more than 150 pages in it. We would be here all weekend. So this is like the most high level ever. Nonetheless, here we go. For the participation, I'm taking that side first. We have seen more than 9,500 participants served. This is the period between May of 2022 and June 30th of 2023. So essentially a 13-month period. For many programs, more like a 6-month period. A lot of programs really being stood up only this calendar year, right? Things had to get in place, right? The legislation was signed, but programs had to get developed, contracts had to get written. The question, of course, is, well, how does that relate to what would we expect? And what I would tell you is it is more than on track. 92% of those participants, among the participants who answered the questions, okay, right? That's a separate question, but 92% of the participants who disclosed their identity in priority populations were from at least one of the priority populations. More than half, 60-some% from 2. So this central question of, are the programs reaching communities that have faced deep and longstanding inequities in education, training, and the labor market? The answer to that is yes, at this point.
Amy, you said a moment ago, we're more than on track. Do we have numbers somewhere where we said during this time period, we're going to serve 9,000 people? And in fact, we serve, it looks like more than 9,500. We set targets like that?
We did not. We did not as an office, and the program did not.
Is there a reason we didn't?
It's a great question. I think because of the complexity of the program, the one question was, where would we even set that target? Because there was so much that had to happen. Sure. The reason I would say that we're more than on track, which I will fully acknowledge is not a quantitative data-based conclusion.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just wondering
what
our yardsticks are.
That's a very good question. Is because of sort of 2 reasons. One is because state contracting processes are not rapid. And these contracting processes happened not universally, but largely at very quick paces. They're literally, people just sort of stopped doing everything else they were doing and just did this and try to get the money out the door, get the money spent. And then knowing it had to be spent by June 30th. And then what we heard repeatedly was grantees struggling mightily with that time frame and making it work somehow anyway. And I could give you examples of that. But that's sort of where that comes from. That's one thing. The other is about Prosperity 10,000 in particular, and I'll wait on that one on the next slide, but don't go there yet, Clay. Completion rate. I do want to just sort of pause also. The 92% of participants from priority populations identifying with one or more priority populations. At the same time that programs were implementing, the grantees, excuse me, were implementing these programs, implementing the grants that they received, standing up programs, building capacity or serving participants. At the same time, we in our office, in coordination with WSI and in coordination with our IT office, we're standing up a data collection and asking grantees who were sort of pressed for time to spend money to start collecting data. Many grantees not necessarily used to collecting data, some not. And so that is an evolving process as well. What we've seen is as that data collection has unfolded over the last year, is fewer and fewer non-responses, more and more participants answering the questions. Part of that's because grantees are able to ask. Part of that's because we've given them training in trauma-informed data collection, so they're more comfortable asking. Part of it's because they're more comfortable getting the data to us if they're not used to really just the technical requirements of a large-scale data collection. And so, we imagine these numbers will shift over time, but in these first 13 months, that's a really high rate. And
how do we know that?
Because, well, that's a very good question also.
And I'm just.
Yes, no, these are great questions. What we did is we took population by population, priority population by priority population, and compared it to sort of the base population in the state where there are data available. They're not for every single, and they're higher than many of them. And the other reason is because, and this is sort of the last point here, and this is actually a required part of the report, is how does the composition of Future Ready Oregon participants compare to the composition of the labor force? And what we're seeing in this first round of data, at least, is that the composition of the Future Ready Oregon participants is more diverse than the composition of the labor force. So communities of color, youth, rural and frontier communities are all represented in greater shares among Future Ready Oregon participants than they are in the labor force. That does not mean that they have achieved economic prosperity, clearly, but it is it's the essential first step to having a more diverse labor force, to having a bigger labor force, I would also argue. These are things that, of course, we'll continue to look at as data continue to come in. I want to speak to these other 2 points here, the 97% overall completion rate. That is what percentage of participants completed services that they received. We did not include wraparound support services or tuition and fee assistance here. Those don't complete in the same way. But career coaching, job training services, what we see across the programs, this is all the programs that served participants in this time frame. They're listed at the top. Across the programs, 97% of participants completed the services that they received. And then the fourth bullet here, about a third of participants used wraparound support services. So there's a couple things here. One is post-secondary, I want to make a caveat. Post-secondary career pathways at the community colleges require intentional support, student supports. So that's a little different. But outside of that, wraparound supports are available as Jennifer referenced, with the Future Ready Oregon funding in ways that a lot of workforce training funding is not. And grantees took advantage of that and actually called to that as repeatedly, not every grantee, but many grantees pointed to the ability to fund wraparound supports as one of the reasons they were able to serve as many participants as they could. Next slide, please. I am not going to go through each one of these. Thank you. So thank you. But they're here for you to see. But what I do want to call out for you all is the first bullet, and that is Prosperity 10,000. Prosperity's 10,000 in this May to June period served 3,928 participants. Now, that is compared to what, right? What does that mean? Well, 10,000 participants is the goal, right? That goal stretches from May of 2022 through December of 2026, right? So in roughly a quarter of that time, 40% of the goal was reached. That's the second reason that I would say that the 9,500 is more than on track. I think that is a particularly strong number because some of Prosperity 10,000 also went for programs that were not necessarily direct service, outreach to community groups, bringing more partners to the table. And so not all of that fits on a slide, right? But again, it's a 150-page report. And then there are some little highlights from each of the other programs here as well. And then next slide. I want to close with 4 recommendations that we put in the report that are really about overall findings. And these, if you were hearing Jennifer, will start to echo in your head. I did not know she was going to say those things, even though she sent me her slides. We are very unbiased in our office. But the first overall finding was that we found consistent and repeated evidence that engaging those who are being served is associated with improved outcomes. This is not quantitative experimental design evidence. This is an overwhelming amount of qualitative evidence at all levels. People serving participants, people serving grantees, people serving other agencies. And so our recommendation there is that future workforce development efforts, as well as Future Ready Oregon currently, aim to, and those especially who aim to advance equity, prioritize engagement and the communities they're serving. The second overall finding is this piece about flexibility of funding and wraparound supports. The ability to serve the barriers that keep people from completing education and training enables them to complete education and training. This is not shocking, I'm sure, to any of you, but it is so consistent in the work that we heard and read and saw and analyzed this year that it is one of our overarching findings and recommendations that workforce development investments should include flexibility of allowable uses of funds in order to be able to reach and meet the needs of the communities they're serving. And then last slide. This third finding is really that, and it may be that this is just where we're at in the timing of Future Ready Oregon, but it is the fact that the topic-focused job training, and in particular, I'm thinking about healthcare, manufacturing, and technology sectors, is still small among the training services that participants are enrolling in. Outside of career pathways, which in and of itself is topic-focused, less than half, 29% of participants outside of the career pathways participants were enrolling in topic-focused training, and less than half of those were in the 3 key industry sectors. This is something we'll be monitoring as we go forward to see if it's that's coming or what. But either way, again, we want to call out potential risks as we see them. And so the recommendation there is to expand the workforce development training programs in those 3 key sectors. And then lastly, this issue of administrative burden. This is a very complex suite of programs, and therefore has a lot of administrative lift. It is not a one and done. And as we shift to ARPA funding, those administrative burdens change and in some cases increase. And so therefore our recommendation is the way Future Ready Oregon has, that workforce development investments continue to provide that support, centralized support for that administrative work to try and free up essentially grantees to do the work that we're asking them to do. We saw lots of examples of that, lots of appreciation for it among grantees, and need to make sure it continues. And with that, I will end.
Awesome, thank you. All right, thank you very much for the update, both of you. Okay, Heather, we are going to move to you to share an updates from the local workforce boards, yours and your colleagues. And we want to include that, make sure that we're including this in all of our meetings on the go forward, and really appreciate your leadership in providing these updates to us.
Thank you. And you don't need to show this because I'm not doing the Prosperity 10,000 report. That was at the last meeting. So I am going to speak a little bit. Sydney is right. She got this in the 11th hour, so that's why it's not in the packet. Would it be okay if I shared my screen, Sydney? Or actually, Clay, here we go.
Working on it.
Is anyone looking at it? I think it's showing now. Does anybody see what's on the screen? Does it look like goal to 50%? Is that what you're seeing? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
It does, Heather.
Great. So I'm going to start with Prosperity 10,000. I really appreciated what Jennifer and what Amy were talking about. And I'd like to just point out that 16% of the $200 million went to support the Prosperity 10,000. So when we talk about what are the outcomes from this investment, let's remember that Prosperity 10,000 only represents 16% of this total package. And we're playing a pretty outsized role right now. And it's partly because we're able to leverage the publicly funded workforce system, right? So the other thing is there were a couple of items that people have asked about that I think are really important that we talk about a little bit more. And that is that although this is called Prosperity 10,000, that was based on a $5,000 cost per for $50 million. What local boards actually received is $31,400,000. We'll round it up. It is very expensive to serve an individual who is currently unemployed with multiple barriers and experiencing poverty and many other things. It costs a heck of a lot more than $5,000 to serve that person. On average, it's more like $8,000 or $10,000. What we got is about a $3,100 cost per. So I have to say that every time we talk about this, because we did not get funded at 10,000. We are still going for it, and we are going to serve 10,000 people in the state. But the other thing I want to remind people, and I feel like Amy did a really nice job laying this out, is that people do not go through programs in a linear fashion. So let's remember that as well. We are not widgets. We are complicated. Life is complicated. Training is complicated. So although we want to say 80, 90, 100% of our people got placed in employment, it doesn't turn on a dime like that. We've only been at this for about a year together. So the only population that was identified that has established goals around enrollment are women. And we are at 46% of a 50% goal. There were no other goals set in the legislation. There were also no enrollment goals established for each local workforce area. So just as a caveat to understand that. The other area that I wanted to talk a little bit about is we are, again, as Amy pointed out, we are only about, I want to say 35% into the performance period that this funding is good for. So meaning that our goals, we're not going to be at 75% placement when we're at 35% into the program delivery. So if you account for, and so I don't know about you guys, but I had no idea when I got my social work degree that I was going to need to know as much as I do about denominators and numerators. Right? My data person laughs. Thank you. So the denominator is not 10,000 people for a placement rate. The denominator is actually the total number of people we have served, which is 3,985. Of those, 1,190 were placed in employment, which is a 30% rate, not a 7% rate, which is what you saw earlier. The other piece I want to point out is the definition that we received from the HEC was this is only counting people who were not employed at the time of enrollment. That means your name's Joe, you work at a gas station, you are pumping gas for minimum wage, you come in, we help you with career services, you do training. It costs us about $8,000 to $10,000 because you do a $5,000 OJT, we're paying rent, you also have to do some in-school training. That person gets placed in a higher wage position, that doesn't count as a placement. So that's a challenge, right? The other population that doesn't get included in this is folks that are already working, but are skilling up to either move up within their organization, so incumbent worker training, or they wouldn't even continue to be able to be employed if they didn't have those skills. So that's something that we are working at the local board level to really go through the data and see if we can't figure out how to better tell that story. Because I don't think anyone here or anyone in the legislature is against people maximizing their income and actually really amplifying their own family resource. So those are the main things I just wanted to share about Prosperity 10,000. The other thing that I wanted to say on the performance front is, and I'll stop sharing my screen. And you'll see this in a memo that you're going to get. And I believe that Andrew talked about this a little bit in our, Andrew McGough from Work Systems, in our last state board meeting. But one of the things that is happening, and I'm going to just give an example from my local area. 8 years ago this month, I got hired to start up East Cascade Works. And at that time, we had a budget of about $2.8 million. We are over $9 million now. And we used to be about 95, 98% federally funded through WIOA. We are now 69% of our funding is federal. So we have a whole heck of a lot more going on than just WIOA at local boards, because as I've also told you many, many times, it's death by 1,000 cuts with WIOA. We have been cut by 50% in the state over the last 12 to 15 years. So what the local boards wanted to do is really tell our story a little bit better in a more transparent and collaborative way. And so what we're looking at doing is repurposing the report that we use called a ETA 9173, which everybody's excited and knows all about, I'm sure, which is actually the performance under WIOA Title I. And that is something that you can find. It's a little bit hidden. Julia sent me the link. It's on the state board's website. The challenge is it just doesn't really tell you the story, right? It just tells you this is the Department of Labor's goal. This is how you did in Oregon. So we're building out a report that's going to not just be about WIOA, and it is going to basically be the same report for every single workforce area. So you will be able to get in and look at and disaggregate and look at data based on population served, grant funding, so that you can actually have a better sense. We're going to be launching this for beta testing in the new year in January, February, and we hope to have it functional so that all of you can actually go in and look at it yourselves. We can present statewide and then break down data in a different way. So you can actually see what this whole suite of services that we're able to deliver by all those funding streams, right? Because it's not just, this board doesn't care about just one funding stream, right? You care about what does the system look like. So my only other thing is I would encourage this board to be more curious about performance from our other partners as well. We tend to have our data entwined with the Oregon Employment Department data. So you have that, but there are myriad titles under WIOA. And since the time that I've been connected to the state board, I haven't heard much curiosity or question about how do we do as a state in performance under, you know, voc rehab or adult basic skills or some other title under WIOA. So we stand ready to partner and figure out how we can tell a more robust story about all of the services and all of the work we're collectively doing together in this system. And then I keep saying the only other thing, and I'm lying every time. The other area that we want to expand to as well, and something that we almost never talk about at this table, is the WIOA youth and the youth-based investments. So how do we talk about the youth programming? We kind of really focus mainly on WorkSource and the publicly funded adult system in this meeting because it's just the biggest thing we got going. But we do make investments in opportunity youth and young people that have fallen out of education. And then we also have the funds, thanks to the HEC's absolutely incredible work around the Oregon Youth Employment Fund. So we'd love to tell a bigger story there as well. So we're planning on having that reporting functionality too. And I'm hoping we made up some time with my brief presentation because Anne's been doing such a good job timekeeping. But if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions or comments?
One comment, and Heather, when you were speaking and some of the challenges you're facing, I compared it to my industry, at least on the staffing end of it, and how staffing kind of deals in that same plane, but on a different level. And with staffing firms, this is data that's old. I haven't looked at the current data, but this is going back probably at least 10 years. Most staffing firms were supplying about 30% of the jobs within a community or within a region. So there's a large percentage of staffing firms that are filling openings, and our industry has changed. I refer to it now as staffing, not temporary agencies, because temporary agencies always had this condensation that, all jobs are temporary, that these are, jobs are not going to be long-term. They're not going to be something that somebody would want to work full-time. And that has totally changed in the 30 some odd years that I've been in business, where now what we do is full-time permanent jobs for the most part. And so, in Washington, in the state of Washington, our office was actually embedded in a workforce system. We had a location inside the Snohomish workforce local up there. And we worked with the employment department, the veterans department, and we played that role of the intermediary between us and our employer group that we work with. And because, you talk about that touch point and what you need to do, and it's not linear, that's exactly what we dealt with. And because we're profit driven to make that person successful, we play a much more integral part in that person's success than somebody else does. And I'm just curious if Oregon's even taken that approach. This is just candid, and this is going back. We used to have a very adversarial, our industry used to have a very adversarial approach. Hopefully I've changed that since I've been on the workforce board over the years, but I just see our industry could be a true asset, but it's going to take some reaching out to our industry, quite honestly, because there's this kind of image that we're not going to be service because we're looked at as a third-class employer in the state. That makes sense.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I actually think it would be kind of interesting for us to come back and talk a little bit about what are each of the local areas doing in partnership, because I know we do. We work with all of the staffing agencies in our area. We all just want people to get jobs. We all get to count it as long as they get a job, right? And I know some boards actually have staffing organizations on their board. So I do think that things have shifted. And I do think that you're a big part of that. I mean, the innovations you've done around apprenticeship and the work that you do, it's not, we're all in this together. I'm just workforce development is a team sport. We need everybody. There's no, there's no reason not to partner. So.
What was I wasn't sure if I was clear. You said it would be good to have as a follow-on for a future meeting. What I wrote, and it's not specific enough. I wrote, what are others doing? Can you repeat that?
Well, I just wondered if Ken was kind of wondering what does it look like? I can bring it back to OWP and kind of ask for examples of how folks are partnering with staffing organizations, if that's helpful. I'm happy to do that.
I would love to see that a little bit, because I'd like to know my industry too. I mean, I'm more than happy to be an advocate. I do it more on a national level than I do at local, just because it seems kind of, if we coordinate too much as a local, it seems like we're conflict of interest there. But nobody wants somebody who's competing with somebody in your backyard too. So, but on a national level, I'm more happy to get that message out. But I mean, honestly, I just see us as a tool now, and
I agree.
And I do remember I was president of the Staffing Association in Oregon, and having a conversation with the employment department in our state, and they told us, why should we help you? We see you as the competition. We don't want to help you. And I thought, well, why am I paying into a system that's trying to defeat me? And that was told by the head in the state. And so that was a very obvious, confrontational, and that has resonated throughout the years. Now I'm old enough to remember that. A lot of newer staffing firms don't know that, but it's that on a day-to-day. And so I'd love to be able to, consider us a resource as opposed to not. And that might be the case. Quite honestly, I'm at a different stage of my life, so I don't know how those relationships are, but I would love to know that so that I could change something.
Yeah. And I don't know if David, if you want to speak to that, I do not get the impression that is a message that David or Jim Farr give to the field to not partner. But I don't know if you want to speak to that, David.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And certainly not intentionally, that we do see it as a partnership. There's certainly some things that we think are our particular niche, and the same for the temp agencies. When you were talking, I was actually thinking a lot of our discussions have been around looking at these areas, construction, the priority industries where we know that there's a huge demand and not enough workers, and how do we get them? And a lot of work to identify what the skill gaps are. It seems like there's potential opportunities really if somebody has 8 of the 10 skills, but they need 6 months of experience to doing this other thing. Is there a type of job where there's a temp assignment that could build that up and have it as almost part of the pipeline? So I think there's great opportunities, and we absolutely should be exploring those partnerships. But yeah, I don't view it as adversarial. I know that Jim Farr doesn't, and I hear him talking to his team, and they really value some of the partnerships in some areas with some of the temp agencies.
I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to push my industry on this committee or with this group, but I just want to know if we're doing something wrong. I would like to change that, because that's been a passion of mine over the years, is to become a legitimate employer and not looked at as a third class, because I really do think we can be a solution and not a problem. And I think and I know the people I know who own multiple staffing firms across the country want to do exactly the same thing. So it's I don't ever want to be looked at as a problem. I'd rather be looked at as a solution.
And I do think, Ken, though, that things have evolved in your industry too. I think you pointed out something that's very true, is that oftentimes it's not about, half the time you guys aren't even the payroll processor, right? Like you're actually doing placement. That's permanent placement. And that's different. That's different than, you know what and I think you do both, but I do think that your industry has evolved a lot as well. So.
Hey, any other questions or comments?
I wanted to go back to Jennifer's presentation and kind of the fact that because the funding is for those wraparound services and because the funding is for those types of programs that are going to have more downstream impact, that does present a unique challenge. And, you know, when you are in that situation, sometimes you have to use extrapolation to show, like, in other words, you may not be able to show in the time period you need to, what you need to get, because it's not possible, right? But what you can say is that when this type of intervention happens in this way, historically data says X happens. And, you know, you might be able to use that as the bank shot to get that, get
Like a
people,
forecast or
yeah,
something.
to see, because, you know, I had this problem running a nonprofit, right? Like we were helping women. And yes, we had some hard numbers. This number of women come in. We believe that they didn't have a job. Now they have a job, some money, but it's harder to capture the other piece of the triple bottom line, they call it, you know, the triple bottom line piece. So I was just thinking about that, and it is a bit of a setup in a way, given the time period combined with who you're funding and how you're funding to get that data, which is much easier when you're doing widgets. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think we have a couple of things working in our favor. One is the intentionality around those short-term investments and being able to demonstrate, particularly through the local workforce board investments and the community college career pathways investments, where we had significant participation early on. We can utilize some of that to demonstrate the efficacy of investing in education and training and career readiness supports and other wraparound supports. Additionally, career pathways programs at the community colleges have a history of demonstrated outcomes and improvement in graduation rates, improvement in retention and persistence. And part of that is why the career pathways investment is actually built into ongoing funding through the Future Ready Oregon statute. It created a line item for ongoing funding to the community colleges. So I appreciate the point, Sherry. I think it does give us some things that we can point to that demonstrate efficacy. And I think maybe Amy can speak to this, but certainly in the near term, we anticipate being able to start speaking about employment outcomes. And then in the longer term, speaking to wage rates and wage progression, right? Heather said it well, but I mean, the intentionality of Future Ready Oregon is not only to expand and diversify employment, but it's also intended to advance equitable prosperity and upward economic mobility. And much of that we won't be able to see for a number of years. So yes, and.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear you saying is really how do we measure the impact of those, especially those infrastructure investments when they're a lot of the impacts are indirect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no perfect way. Mm-hmm. And so the tack that we tend to take is, well, then let's do several imperfect ways and draw conclusions from that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are looking at trends, for example, in the career pathways, trends in the community colleges over time as a whole and within the individual community colleges. So, okay, you used your career pathways grant to do this, you used yours to do this. What are we seeing happen 2 years later, right? In comparing for example, colleges who really focused on outreach compared to colleges who focused on maybe updated CTE equipment. Right? Different strategies, not that one's bad, but there are other ways that we can start to try and compare folks or compare different programs and different approaches. And then when we say, okay, well, any one of these is imperfect, but if things are lining up, trending in one direction, when we take them as a whole, we start to draw conclusions. You know, because the only alternative is to say, well, okay, you know, this half of the state's going to get funding and this half isn't. I mean, that's not going to work, right? So.
I do want to commend you for liking this data now, because inevitably you're going to get a call. It's going to be from a policymaker or a reporter. And if we don't have yardsticks for success, the reporter in particular is going to make them up or say, you should have this information. Why don't you? Well, my only suggestion would be keep it short and simple and do it annually. And I say this not only as somebody who's been running a job board now for many, many years, but my career has been in communications. So I was a spokesman for 3 different Oregon state agencies and ran a PR firm for 15 years. And what those experiences helped me learn that, you know, when you're doing something like this, you got to be able to say what the problem was and why we're taking the action. The second thing is why we're taking the action we are. And this is what it's going to be like when we're done. And here are the yardsticks that demonstrate that. And don't apologize for it. These are our measures that we've worked out, and lead with it. And you're doing that. So I would just encourage you to keep it a little shorter and simpler.
Well, I will hopefully reassure you and let you know that there's a
I'm not
shorter
worried.
executive report,
Yeah.
executive summary. But that for those, especially those who are in particular programs who want to know the deeper dive for their program, then they can go to that.
I mean, for me, the headline listening to you speak was that this is a program that's running from May of 2022 through 26, and we're at 40% of our goal, the number of people we had hoped to serve. And that
I can't say that across the board, but that we could say that for
Yeah,
10,000
obviously,
for sure. Yeah.
But
Yep.
if we don't come up with defensible numbers like that, people will make them up for us. So why not get ahead of it? And you are getting ahead of it. So kudos to you.
All right, thank you all. We're going to head into our last part of our agenda, the operations portion. So Clay is going to be providing us a state and local planning update, as well as an update on the talent summit and talent assessment.
And just a few comments related to both those issues. First, state and local planning. You heard earlier in the meeting from Todd talking about updating sort of progress on the strategic plan, the joint priorities. Well, one of the mechanisms that we have for implementing the WTDB strategic plan and those joint priorities is the state and local planning process. And they're both underway. At the state level, we have a broad array of different agencies that go beyond those that are defined as, work source, as we've recently defined as work source, to include, a variety of others, such as the Community Services Block Grant Program and Housing, and CTE programs with the Department of Ed, as well as HEC, and Bureau of Labor and Industries programs. So all of these various agencies are currently working on responding to a very detailed document that comes from the federal government of things that they want to see in the state plan. A lot of that is very compliance oriented, but not all of it. And some key aspects of it are going to get right to the heart of our strategic plan, the implementation of our strategic plan, and those key joint priorities. So that's happening now. We expect that we'll have a draft available for public comment throughout the month of February. And then we have to submit it on March 4th through an online portal. somewhere towards the end of February, we're gonna have to create a special meeting. The deadline at the federal level didn't match up with the March meeting for the WTDB. So we will be creating a special meeting just to vote on the state plan. But we will let you know as we post it for public comment, just because we want you to comment if you have any. But also because it'll give you the opportunity to review the plan and be prepared for that vote. So that's coming. At the local level, they are similarly engaging a number of partners in their locality and region. They are similarly responding to the WTDB strategic plan and those joint priorities, but they also have to have a key interest and focus on local priorities and the things that are important in their region. So they will be completing their plan, and probably in that same January, February timeframe, posting their plans for public comment. So wherever you might reside, or if you participate on a local board, you'll see those things come up, and you'll have an opportunity to respond to that if you'd like. Local plans are due March 18th. And whereas we need the approval to submit the state plan, in this case, local boards are submitting their plans for the WTDB to approve. That process will go from the time that they submit them to the June meeting where we would expect to approve them. So we'll be looking for few volunteers, as we have in the past, from the WTDB to help us review the strategic portions of local plans. So that's state and local planning. Any questions specifically on that?
How many people will you be looking for on the review process?
That's a good question. I think the last time we had 3 or 4.
Okay.
I just wanted to throw out there that Clay's doing a really good job communicating about this and being very coordinated. And I know you all love that base camp, but you're doing a great job. Thank you, Clay. I appreciate your proactive communication.
So talent assessment and summit, this is even briefer. The talent assessment is underway. If you recall, we are looking at some key industries, and we're calling essential occupations that have been data derived. Our consultant has done some research on industries and occupations to take a look at, and they are gathering information, availability of sort of the supply side of the workforce. So programs that are generating these types of occupations, and they're also doing that through an equity lens. So we'll have a lot of information that will ultimately be wrapped up in a report that will be presented at the Talent Summit, which takes me to the summit. We are hopefully very close to sending out a save the date. We're looking at mid-May, but I don't want to tell you yet. We'll give you an official save the date notice. And again, hopefully that'll be soon. So if you hear about focus groups for the talent assessment or survey for the talent assessment, both of those things are underway right now, and you may be participating or asked to participate, please do so. And then as we continue to develop the program for the Talent Summit, we'll be asking, I'm sure, for your assistance in a variety of ways to help us put that program together. So, yes, Sherry.
I don't have anything to say related to the Talent Summit. I just want to highlight like the work that the folks on the board and the staff do and how it relates to real life. Because I think it's a really interesting real life story. So Julia and Clay and I were working on credentials that work, remember? And Clay did all this research to come up with, was it like the top 5 or 10 jobs that
Well, we ended up having 100, but.
100, but the
That's if you.
I was surprised by was the top ones included massage therapists. And at the time I gave Clay a bunch of grief about that. I'm like, massage therapy. It was up there with like, I don't know, industry tech lead or computer program, like massage therapist. So anyway, the other day I'm at my acupuncturist and she's telling me just randomly, she can't find a massage therapist. That the Portland area has less than 60%, they only have about 40% of the massage therapists they need. And when people are coming out of the when they're coming out of the massage therapy school, she's having a problem because they're demanding $50 an hour, benefits, and a flex schedule because they can get it. And I was like, oh my God, Clay put this up. That was like 3 years ago or something. I mean, it's crazy. So this is a real world example of needing credentialing, something that apparently if you can get $50 an hour and demand benefits and say you work when you want to, people might want to consider that job. And, you know, and the fact that she identified in her and other providers that their system is really low on the number of people they need. Like she even had a number. I was like, what? So anyway, there you go.
Nice job, Clay.
Hey, Clay.
Anything else, Clay? All right, any final comments, questions before we adjourn? All right, well, I want to wish you all a wonderful, happy holidays, however you celebrate, and I hope you will find time to reflect and spend time with family and friends and recharge your batteries. Thank you for all that you're doing for the citizens of Oregon, and our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.